the bastard daughter who became queen of the empire. They called her the tycoon's shame, the bastard daughter who didn't belong. At a gala dripping in diamonds and cruelty, Arya Vance learned that invisibility was its own kind of survival, until a man with ice in his eyes and an empire in his pocket decided she belonged to him. One dance, one kiss, one choice that would burn down a dynasty. If you believe every outcast deserves their crown, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story travels tonight. The Hartley Grand Ballroom glittered like something dipped in poison. That was the first thought that crossed Arya Vance's mind as she stepped through the gilded doors. And it surprised her, because she'd been told 100 times that she didn't have thoughts worth keeping. She had them anyway. She kept them the way other girls kept diaries. Hidden, folded small, tucked somewhere nobody could reach. The chandeliers hung heavy overhead, each one the size of a small car, throwing shards of light across the marble floor. 300 people in couture, in jewels, in the kind of practiced laughter that cost more than most people's rent. The orchestra was playing something soft and Viennese, the kind of music meant to make rich people feel older than they were. It smelled like roses and champagne, and underneath that, something sharper. Money, Arya thought. Money had a smell when there was enough of it in one room. She smoothed the front of her dress with one hand. It was navy blue, long-sleeved, almost shapeless, a dress her stepmother Vivian had picked out for her with the quiet satisfaction of a woman choosing a shroud. "You'll wear this one," Vivian had said that morning, not looking at her. "The other dresses are for the family." The family. As if Arya weren't one. As if the blood in her veins weren't half Vance, half the man standing on the far side of the ballroom right now, shaking hands with a senator, Gregory Vance. Her father. Her not father. Her whatever he was. He didn't look at her when she walked in. He never did. Not in public. Champagne? A waiter had appeared at her elbow, holding a silver tray. He was young, maybe her age, and he was looking at her the way waiters sometimes did, careful, curious, trying to place her. A woman alone at a gala like this was either very important or very lost. "No," Arya said. "Thank you." He moved on. She watched him go. Watched him bow slightly to a woman in emerald silk who plucked a glass from his tray without thanking him and turned her back on him before the glass had even settled in her hand. That was how it worked here. You were either a person or you were furniture, and the line between the two was thinner than people thought. Arya knew which side she was on tonight. "Oh my God, is that her?" The voice was a whisper, and not a whisper. It was a stage whisper, the kind designed to carry. Arya didn't turn her head, but she let her eyes shift sideways. 3 women, early 20s, 1 blonde, 2 brunette, all of them in dresses that probably cost more than the car Arya had taken to get here. She recognized the blonde. Celeste Vance, her half-sister. "Vivian said she was going to let her come," one of the brunettes murmured, loud enough. "I didn't actually think—" "Because Vivian's being generous," Celeste said. She had a voice like a very expensive cat. She said the girl needed to see how the real world works, some kind of life lesson. They laughed, not loud, just enough. Arya's hand tightened around the small clutch she was holding. Her knuckles went white. She relaxed them, slowly, deliberately, the way her mother had taught her. "Never let them see your hands shake, baby. Hands give everything away." Her mother had been dead for 4 years. Arya still heard her voice most days. "Don't stand in the middle of the room like that," Celeste said, walking past her now, close enough for her perfume to crawl up Arya's throat. "It's embarrassing for everyone." Arya moved. She didn't mean to, but she did. She walked toward the edge of the ballroom, where the tall windows looked out over the gardens, where the crowd thinned and the shadows were deeper. She stood with her back almost against a marble column and tried to breathe the way her therapist had taught her, before her father had stopped paying for the therapist. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. A waiter passed. Another. Someone laughed, high and sharp, from the direction of the bar. A man in a tuxedo was telling a story with his hands, and a small circle of other men were nodding, pretending it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. "Miss Vance?" She flinched. She hated that she flinched. A man she vaguely recognized had stepped into her line of sight, 50s. Silver hair, teeth too white, the kind of white that looked wet. She thought his name was Marcus something, a developer, a friend of her father's in the way that all these men were friends. "It is Miss Vance, isn't it?" he said, and his eyes traveled down her in a slow, leisurely sweep that made her skin feel 2 sizes too small. "I thought so. You have your father's eyes." "Thank you," Arya said. It came out flat. He smiled. He didn't move away. "Gregory didn't tell me you'd be here tonight. It was a last-minute thing." He took a step closer. She could smell the scotch on him, under the cologne. "How old are you now, sweetheart? You must be, what, 21? 22? 23. 23. He said it like he was tasting it. "And still single?" She didn't answer. "Well," he said, leaning in slightly, one hand coming up to rest on the column just above her shoulder. "If your father isn't introducing you around, maybe he just doesn't know who to introduce you to. I could make some recommendations." His hand slid down the column. His knuckle brushed her bare shoulder above the high collar of her dress. Arya went very still. "I'm fine, thank you," she said quietly. "Qui is fine, thank God. Are you?" He smiled. The teeth again. "Because from where I'm standing, you look a little lonely, sweetheart." I said I'm fine. Her voice had gone harder. He noticed. He didn't like it. She saw the flicker in his face, the one she'd seen 100 times before in men like him, the moment when flirtation curdled into something uglier. "You know," he said, lower now, "girls in your position should be a little more grateful when someone takes an interest. You don't exactly have options, do you?" Her jaw tightened. She opened her mouth. She had a sentence ready. She had lots of sentences ready. She always did. She kept them stacked up inside her like books on a shelf, and she had learned long ago which ones were safe to take down and which ones would cost her. She never got to say it. Because across the ballroom, something changed. It was subtle at first. A dip in the music, not in volume, but in attention. A ripple along the surface of the crowd, the way a pond moves when something large passes underneath it. Heads turned. Conversations thinned out mid-sentence. A waiter almost dropped a tray, and then Arya felt it, the weight of a gaze. She looked up. He was standing on the upper balcony, one hand resting on the wrought iron railing, looking down at the ballroom like a man who had already counted everyone in it and decided what each of them was worth. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair swept back, a face that looked like it had been cut from something harder than flesh, high cheekbones, a jaw like a blade, and eyes that from this distance looked almost black. He was in a charcoal suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt open, and there was something wrong with him. That was the only way she could put it. Something wrong. Not ugly, not damaged. Wrong the way a wolf in a room full of lapdogs would be wrong. His stillness was wrong. His calm was wrong. The way the crowd below him had dimmed the moment he appeared was wrong, and he knew it, and he didn't care. He was looking straight at her. "Are you even listening to me?" Marcus. She'd forgotten Marcus was still there. "Sorry," she said, not sorry at all, not looking away from the balcony. "Who is that?" Marcus followed her gaze. His face changed. Something drained out of it. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Who is he?" "Nobody you want to know, sweetheart." Marcus stepped back from her, suddenly, finally. He adjusted his jacket. He was looking everywhere except up at the balcony. I should go find Gregory. Excuse me." He left. She watched him go. She watched him weave through the crowd with a speed that suggested he wanted very much to be somewhere else, and she filed that away. Whoever the man on the balcony was, Marcus was afraid of him. Marcus, who 5 seconds ago had been caging her against a column with his Scotch breath and his wet smile, was now the third most frightened-looking man in this ballroom, and the other 2 were bartenders trying not to stare. She looked back up. The man was gone. For a second, she thought she'd imagined him. The balcony was empty. The iron railing was just iron again, catching the light. Then she felt him behind her. She didn't hear him. That was the terrifying part. 300 people in a marble ballroom, and this man had crossed it without making a single sound she could register, and she only knew he was there because the air behind her had changed, gone denser, gone warmer, gone still. "You looked like you needed rescuing." he said. His voice was low, quiet. A voice that didn't need to raise itself to be heard, because it was the kind of voice people leaned toward without knowing they were doing it. Arya didn't turn around. "I didn't ask to be rescued," she said. "No." A pause. "You didn't." She heard something in his voice, not amusement exactly, something a little colder than amusement. Interest. She turned. He was closer than she thought, close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to meet his eyes. Up close, they weren't black. They were a very dark gray, like wet slate, and they had a stillness in them that felt almost surgical. She'd seen that look once, in a documentary about a man who had killed 9 people. She had not expected to see it again at a charity gala. "Then I apologize," he said, "for the presumption." "You didn't rescue me. He left on his own." "He left," the man said, "because he saw me looking." "Why were you looking?" He didn't answer at first. He was studying her face the way some people studied paintings, not hungrily, the way Marcus had, but analytically, taking inventory. Arya had the strange and unwelcome sensation that he was seeing every part of her that she had spent the last 4 years trying to hide. "Because you were the only person in this room," he said finally, "who didn't want to be here." Arya blinked. "That's not true. There are plenty of people who don't want to be here." "No." His mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. "They want to be seen here. That's different." She didn't have a sentence stacked up for that one. "What's your name?" he asked. She almost didn't tell him. She almost said Jane, or Sarah, or nothing, because something about him was making the alarm in her chest ring harder than it ever had, and every instinct she had was screaming at her to walk away from this man right now while she still could. But she was Gregory Vance's daughter, she told him. Arya Vance. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Not the name, she thought, the last name. "Lucian Drakov," he said. She waited for the rest. The title, the company, the qualifier. It didn't come. He just stood there, hands loose at his sides, and watched her process it. She didn't recognize the name. She was almost sure she didn't. But she recognized the way the crowd behind him was moving. She could see it over his shoulder. People were giving them space. A wide, careful circle of space. An old woman in diamonds had turned and begun walking in the opposite direction. A man in a tuxedo had stopped mid-sip and was staring at them. Whoever Lucian Drakov was, people knew him. "You're not from here," she said. "No." "Where are you from?" "Everywhere, eventually." "That's not an answer." "It's the one I have." He was doing it again, that thing where he looked at her like she was a problem he hadn't decided yet how to solve. She hated it. She also couldn't look away from it. "Dance with me," he said. It wasn't a question. "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't know you. Because I don't dance. Because—" She gestured vaguely at the ballroom, at the gold and the glitter and the 300 people who would turn and stare the moment she set foot on the floor with a man like this. "Because I'm not supposed to be noticed tonight." "By whom?" "By anyone." He tilted his head slightly. He looked for the first time genuinely curious. "Who told you that?" "Everyone who matters." "Then they don't matter." And he held out his hand. It was a big hand, well-shaped. There was a thin white scar running down the side of his palm, a long one, old. She stared at it. She stared at it for what felt like a long time, while somewhere very far away the orchestra began a new piece, and the crowd began to turn toward them in earnest. And she knew that if she took this man's hand, something in her life would break in a way it could not be mended. She also knew she had nothing left that wasn't already broken. She took his hand. The ballroom inhaled. She heard it. She actually heard it. The collective intake of breath, the pause, the hundreds of conversations suddenly running a half-beat slower. Lucian Drakov closed his fingers around hers and led her onto the floor, and Arya Vance, who had been told her whole life to stand at the edges, found herself walking straight into the center of the light. His hand settled on her waist. His other hand held hers. The music began, a slow 3-count, and he moved her into it with a certainty that suggested he had danced before in rooms that were much more dangerous than this one. "You said you don't dance," he murmured. "I don't." "You're doing it." "I'm letting you do it." That almost got a smile out of him. Almost. "Who's the tall man?" he said. staring at us from the staircase. Arya didn't have to look. That's my father. Ah, Gregory Vance. I know. There was something in the way he said it that made her glance up. You know him? I know of him? Is that different? It is when it's him. The song kept going. Lucien moved her in a wide, slow arc across the floor. And now other couples were peeling away from the edges of the ballroom. Now the floor was filling in, but there was still that bubble of space around them, a small clear zone that no one seemed willing to enter. Arya could feel eyes on her from every direction. She could feel Celeste's eyes. She could feel Vivian's eyes. She could feel the Marcus men, the ones who had not yet decided whether she was worth hunting, rearranging their maps of the room. They're all looking at me, she said quietly. Yes. I've been in this house a dozen times. No one has ever looked at me. I know. How? He didn't answer for a moment. His hand at her waist shifted just slightly. His thumb pressed against the fabric of the dress, a single point of pressure, steady. Because I've been watching you, he said, for longer than tonight. Something cold slid down her spine. What does that mean? It means we should talk somewhere else. I don't go somewhere else with strange men. Smart. Then why? Because I'm not offering you somewhere else, he said. I'm telling you that what I'm about to do will be very public and very loud, and you should know before I do it that you will not be invisible after tonight, not in this room, not in this city, not anywhere that matters. Arya stopped moving. The music kept going without them. Lucien stopped too, smooth as water, and now they were just standing in the middle of the floor, his hand at her waist, her hand in his, 300 people pretending not to stare. What are you going to do? She whispered. Whatever you let me. That's not an answer. You keep saying that. Because you keep not answering. He looked down at her, really looked. And for the first time, something happened in his face that she hadn't seen before. A softening, so small and so brief that she almost doubted it had been there, gone as fast as it came. Arya, he said. And he said her name like he'd been practicing it. Tonight, one of two things is going to happen to you. Either you're going to go home with your stepmother in that car that doesn't have your name on it, and tomorrow a man very much like the one who had his hand on your shoulder an hour ago is going to offer your father a number, and your father is going to take it. That's one of them. Her breath had stopped. What's the other one? I kiss you, he said, in front of every person in this room. And tomorrow, every one of them knows that you are not for sale. The floor tilted. That was the only way she could describe it later. The ballroom did not tilt, but the floor inside her own chest did, some inner plane sliding sideways. And for one endless second she could see, with a clarity that was almost cruel, exactly how true what he had just said was. The conversation she had overheard and pretended not to hear. The men Gregory had brought to the house over the last 6 months. Men who had asked very specific questions about her and then stopped asking them after certain documents had been reviewed. The dress Vivian had chosen tonight, the way her father had not looked at her once since she walked in. She wasn't at this gala by accident. She was here to be introduced. How do you know that? She breathed. Because I'm a man who pays attention to deals being put together. And this, what you're offering, what is this? A better deal. For who? His mouth did that thing again, the almost smile. For both of us. Her hand was shaking in his. She could feel it now. She couldn't remember when it had started. And if I say no, she asked, then I walk off this floor, and you finish your night the way it was always going to end. You'd let me. I would. Why? Because I'm not in the business, he said quietly, of collecting women who didn't choose it. She looked at him. She looked at him for longer than she had looked at anyone in a very long time. She looked past the suit and the scar on his hand and the stillness that made the room give him space. She looked for the lie. She did not find one. That did not mean it wasn't there. Arya was not a fool. She knew that men like Lucien Drukov, whatever he was, whatever empire he was standing on top of, did not do things without knowing the shape of what they would get back. There was a calculation here. She just could not, at this moment, find the edges of it. But she could see very clearly the edges of the other offer, the one she hadn't known she was being offered until 5 minutes ago. She could see Marcus's wet smile and Vivian's shroud dress and the car with no name on it and she could see the rest of her life stretching out from that car like a long, dim hallway. She had spent 4 years being invisible. She had spent 4 years keeping her hands still so no one would see them shake. She was so tired. "Do it," she said. He moved. He did not lunge. He did not rush. Lucian Drakov brought his hand up from her waist to the side of her jaw with the unhurried care of a man who had decided the outcome a long time ago. And when he tilted her face up to his, she had full, clear time to change her mind. He waited. He actually waited, a fraction of a second, with his mouth a breath away from hers, and she understood that he was still giving her the door. She didn't take it. He kissed her. It was not a soft kiss. It was not cruel, either. It was claiming, there was no other word for it, and it was unhurried, and it was done in full view of 300 people and a string quartet and the man who had called himself her father for 23 years. His hand on her jaw was warm. His mouth tasted faintly of smoke and something darker, something she couldn't name. She felt her free hand come up without her permission and settle against his chest, and under her palm, through the fabric of his shirt, she felt his heartbeat. It was slow, terribly slow, like the heartbeat of a man doing math. Somewhere very far away, she heard a woman gasp. Somewhere less far away, she heard a glass break. Lucian pulled back. Not all the way. His forehead stayed against hers for a moment, and in that moment, with the whole ballroom staring and the music struggling to remember its own melody, he said something quietly enough that only she could hear. "Breathe, Arya." She hadn't realized she'd stopped. She breathed. He straightened. He let her go, slowly, one finger at a time, with the same care he had taken her in, and he turned, without hurry, to face the ballroom. He did not speak loudly. He didn't have to. "Miss Vance," he said, "is with me." The silence that followed lasted about 2 seconds. Then it broke all at once. "What? Who is that? Gregory, do you see? Is that Drakov?" Arya's knees were shaking. She could feel them shaking. She could not make them stop, and she didn't try. Through the crowd, she saw her father. Gregory Vance was standing at the edge of the staircase, one hand on the banister, and his face was white. Not angry, not embarrassed. White. Bloodless. The way a man's face went when he had just watched a number he owned be erased in front of him. Next to him, Vivian was saying something, low and fast, her mouth working. Gregory wasn't listening. He was looking straight at Lucian, and Lucian was looking straight back, and something was passing between them that Arya could not read but could absolutely feel, the way you feel weather coming before you see the clouds. Celeste, a few feet away, had put one hand over her mouth. "Walk with me," Lucian said. Arya looked at him. "Now?" "Now." "Where?" "Away from this room." His hand found the small of her back. Not pushing, just there. "They're going to come over here in about 30 seconds, and I'd rather not do this in front of them." "Do what?" "Explain." She let him move her. They walked off the floor together, through that strange, parted sea of a crowd, and people were speaking, some loud, some in whispers, some in that hissed breath that women do when they're deciding whether to pity you or destroy you, and Arya heard none of it clearly. Her hearing had gone thin. Her face was hot. Her mouth still felt the shape of his. A waiter almost dropped a tray. Lucian caught it without looking. They reached the edge of the ballroom. A small side door, half hidden behind a velvet rope. Lucian unclipped the rope with one hand and pushed the door open, and on the other side was a narrow hallway, dim, quieter, the music suddenly muffled behind them. He let the door close. The silence was enormous. Arya turned to him. Her hand was still shaking. She didn't hide it now. "What," she said, "have you done?" "What I said I was going to do." "No. No, what have you done? Do you understand?" She pressed a hand to her forehead. She laughed, once, a short, breathless laugh, with no humor in it. "Do you understand what my life is going to be tomorrow?" "Yes." "Say it." "Tomorrow," he said, "every person in this city who thought you were a piece of furniture is going to wake up and find out you're a fortress. And they are going to spend the next week figuring out who built it. And who did build it. We're going to build it, together." "I don't know you." "No. I don't trust you." "Also no." "Then why—" Her voice cracked, and she hated it, hated the crack. "Why would I do this? Why would I walk off that floor with you? Why did I just let you? Because, he said quietly, 30 seconds before I came over to you, I saw the way you looked at the door. And I knew you had already decided, long before I got there, that you weren't going home tonight as the same girl who walked in. Arya stared at him. I was going to leave, she whispered. That's what I was thinking. I was going to leave and walk to the train station. I know. You don't know. I do. How? He didn't answer that. He didn't have to. There was something in his stillness that felt like an answer all on its own, and she didn't have the energy to fight it. Down the hallway, a door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped through. Not a waiter, not a guest, something else. He was built like a door himself. He looked at Lucian, nodded once, and said, Car's out back, sir. Thank you, Mr. Volkov. The man didn't leave. He stood in the hallway, at a polite distance, hands folded in front of him. Arya looked at him. He's yours, she said. Yes. You had a car ready. I had a car ready. For me? For either of us. Lucien's eyes held hers, depending on what you decided. Behind them, on the other side of the ballroom door, Arya could hear voices rising. Her father's voice, Vivian's voice, other voices she didn't recognize. They were coming. Lucian heard them too. He didn't look at the door. Arya, he said, I'm not going to force your hand. I want you to understand that. If you want to go back in there, I'll open this door right now. I'll tell them it was a mistake. I'll take the embarrassment. You can go home tonight, and tomorrow you can pretend none of this happened, and I will not come near you again. And the other offer my father was going to take? He didn't flinch. I can't stop that if you're not under my name. The sentence landed between them like a dropped stone. Under my name. She should have laughed at it. She should have slapped him. She should have told him what century it was. She didn't. Because she was thinking about Marcus's hand sliding down the column. She was thinking about Vivian choosing the navy dress. She was thinking about the way Gregory Vance had not looked at her once, all night, and she was understanding, finally, fully, in the way you understand something you've always known, that she had been something he was going to spend. She wiped her face. There were no tears on it. She was surprised. I want to know one thing first, she said. Ask. Why me? He looked at her for a long time before he answered. I had 3 reasons, he said. When I walked into this building, 2 of them were about your father. 1 of them was about you. Which was which? That, he said, is a long conversation. We're having it. Tonight? Tonight. He studied her, and slowly, that almost smile came back. All right, he said. Tonight. Behind them, the ballroom door burst open. Gregory Vance stepped through, and his face was no longer white. It was red. Vivian was a half step behind him, her mouth already open, and behind her 2 men in security suits who Arya recognized as her father's. You, Gregory started. He was pointing at Lucien. His finger was trembling. You don't know what you've just done. I do, actually, Lucien said. He hadn't moved. His hand was still on the small of Arya's back. I've just made your daughter very difficult to sell. The word sell landed in Gregory's face like a slap. Arya, Vivian snapped. Her voice was high, tight. Come here, right now. We are leaving. Arya did not move. Arya, her father said, and his voice had changed. It had gone quiet. It had gone careful. Come away from that man. She looked at him. She looked at the man who had raised her, badly, distantly, with a hand held out only when cameras were nearby. And she looked at the small clutch in her hand and the navy dress that was supposed to be her shroud, and the shaking in her fingers that she was no longer bothering to hide. Did you promise me to someone? She asked. His jaw worked. Arya, this is not the place. Did you? We'll discuss this at home. Did you, Dad? He didn't answer. That was the answer. Arya felt something in her chest that she had never quite felt before. It wasn't grief. Grief she was used to. This was colder, and it was older, and it had been there for a long time, waiting for permission to come out. She turned her head, looked at Lucien. Which car, she said, is yours? The black one. Take me to it. Gregory lunged forward a step. One of the security men moved with him. Lucien's man, the one who looked like a door, stepped very slightly to the side, not blocking, not threatening, just existing in the space between them in a way that made everyone remember how large he was. Lucien did not take his eyes off her. "Are you sure, Arya?" "No." "Do you want to do it anyway?" "Yes." He nodded, once. He held out his hand for the second time that night, and for the second time that night, Arya Vance took it. They walked down the hallway together. Behind them, Gregory Vance was saying her name, over and over, his voice rising and cracking, and Vivian was telling him to shut up, and Celeste had appeared somewhere in the doorway with her hand still pressed to her mouth, and her eyes very wide. Arya did not turn around. She did not look back. Mr. Volkov pushed the far door open and held it for them, and cool night air poured in, smelling of rain and gasoline and the strange, clean smell of a city past midnight. At the curb, a black car was waiting. Long, low, engine already running. A driver in a dark coat opened the back door as they approached. Arya paused with her hand on the roof of the car. She looked up, just for a second. The Hartley building towered above her, all gold light and high windows. And in one of those windows, on the third floor, she thought she saw a figure watching. She couldn't be sure. "Miss Vance?" Lucien said behind her. "Don't call me that," she said. "What would you prefer?" "I don't know yet." "All right." She got in the car. He got in after her. The door closed. The locks clicked. The driver pulled away from the curb, and the lights of the Hartley Grand Ballroom began to shrink in the rear window, and Arya Vance sat in the dark with a stranger's scar-handed silhouette next to her and understood, for the first time in her life, that she had just made a decision nobody could make for her. Her hands were still shaking. She didn't hide them. Lucien said nothing for a long time. He was looking out his own window, watching the city go by. Then, without turning, he spoke. "There's a house," he said, "about 20 minutes from here. It's mine. It has a guest wing with a lock you control. There will be a woman there named Katya. She's going to help you with whatever you need tonight, and she answers to you, not to me. You can go into that wing and lock the door and not come out until the sun rises, and no one in my employ will so much as knock on it. That is the first thing I want you to know." Arya stared at him. "Why are you telling me that?" "Because," he said, "you just got in a car with a man you don't know, and I want you to remember that you had a choice, even after you stopped having one." "I don't understand you," she said quietly. "You will." She didn't know then how true that was. She only knew that outside the window, the city was sliding past in a blur of light and dark, that her phone was buzzing in her clutch with names she did not want to read, that somewhere behind her Gregory Vance was already making phone calls that would shake loose things that had been buried for a very long time. And she knew, sitting next to this man with his slow heartbeat and his quiet voice and his 3 reasons for walking into that building tonight, that nothing about her life, starting tomorrow morning, was going to look anything like the life she had been given. She folded her hands in her lap. She let them shake. And for the first time in 4 years, Arya Vance did not feel invisible. The car moved through the city the way a knife moves through water, without hurry, without sound, slicing past intersections where traffic lights bled red into the wet pavement. Arya watched the reflection slide across Lucien's face in the window beside him. Light, dark. Light, dark. She could not tell, in the flashes, whether he was watching the street or watching her in the glass. Her phone buzzed for the 9th time. She turned it over in her lap without looking at the screen. "You can answer it," Lucien said. "I don't want to." "It'll be easier if you do. Otherwise they'll be on your doorstep by morning." "I don't have a doorstep anymore," Arya said. She surprised herself with how even her voice was. "My doorstep is his doorstep. I just walked away from it." He didn't argue. He just nodded, once, as if filing that away. The phone buzzed again. She flipped it over. 23 missed calls. Gregory, Vivian, Celeste. A number she didn't know, and then the same number again, and then a third unsaved number. She thumbed the phone to silent and turned it back face down. "Who's the unknown number?" Lucien asked. "I don't know. That's what unknown means." "Humor me." She flipped the phone back up. The number had a 628 area code. She didn't recognize it. "Not local," Lucien said. He was watching sideways now. "It'll be one of the men your father owes." "He owes men." Lucian's jaw did something small. We'll get to that, he said. Get to it now. Arya Tsim, you said we'd talk tonight. You said I could ask. And I will answer. At the house. When you're sitting, and you've had water, and you're not still inside the 10 minutes after a man kissed you in public for the first time in your life. That last part landed strangely in her chest. How do you know it was the first time? He looked at her finally, full on. Not cold. Not warm, either. Because you haven't touched your mouth once, he said. Women who've been kissed like that before check, at some point, to see if their lipstick has moved. You haven't. You forgot you had a mouth until I mentioned it. Arya's hand, traitorous, came up to her lips. She dropped it again immediately. He didn't smile. She was glad, in a strange, unreasonable way, that he didn't smile. If he had smiled, she would have hated him, and she wasn't ready to hate him yet. She needed to understand him first. They drove on. The house was not a house. That was the first thing Arya thought when the gates opened and the driveway rolled out in front of them, pale gravel under the headlights. A long, slow curve that disappeared through a line of black hedges. A guardhouse sat at the entrance, and a man inside it stood up when the car went by and did not wave. Beyond the hedges, lawn. Beyond the lawn, the building itself. 2 stories of stone and glass. Its windows lit soft and gold like something from a magazine shoot, except real and occupied, and very quiet. How many people live here? She asked. Sometimes 9, sometimes 3. Tonight with you, it'll be 7. That's not a house, Mr. Drakov. That's a staff. Call me Lucian. I don't know if I'm going to. All right. The car slowed. A woman was standing at the top of the stone steps, her hands folded in front of her, her hair pulled back in a low knot. She was maybe 50, maybe older, with a face that had seen things and decided, some time ago, to stop being surprised by them. She wore a simple dark dress, no apron, no uniform. She looked, Arya thought, like a person who had worked in houses like this long enough to own small parts of them herself. Katya? Lucian said before Arya could ask. She runs the house. She's been with me 11 years. She is not paid to lie to you, and she will not. The driver opened Arya's door. She got out slowly. The gravel crunched under her heels, and the night air was clean in a way she hadn't expected. No city in it, no exhaust, just cold and cut grass and the faint mineral smell of stone. She smoothed the front of the navy dress. It felt suddenly like someone else's costume. Miss Vance, Katya said, coming down the steps. Her voice was low, accented, unhurried. Welcome. Your rooms are ready. There is food if you are hungry, and there is a bath drawn if you are not. I have left both doors to the guest wing unlocked from the inside, so you may lock them yourself, in whatever order you like, once you are within. Arya blinked at her. You had all of this ready? Yes? Before I arrived. Yes. He told you I was coming? Katya glanced, only briefly, at Lucien. He told me, she said. There was a chance. Arya looked at Lucien. He was standing by the car, hands loose at his sides, watching the conversation without inserting himself into it. When she caught his eye, he tipped his head, very slightly, toward the house. Go in, the tip said. I'll be along when you want me to be. She walked up the steps with Katya. Inside, the house was warmer than she'd expected and less perfect. That was the second thing she noticed. It was beautiful, of course. Dark wood floors, old rugs that had been good rugs a long time ago and still were, a long entry hall with a single enormous black and white photograph of a mountain range she didn't recognize. But there were human things in it. A pair of men's boots by the door, mud still caked on them. A book left face down on a side table, spine cracked. A half-finished cup of coffee someone had forgotten near a lamp. People lived here. Really lived here. Your wing is this way, Katya said. Through the library, up the back stair, the entire east side is yours. You do not need to come out for anything. There is a kitchenette. There is a bath. There is a telephone on the wall inside the door that rings only to me if you need anything at any hour. It does not ring to him. Why not to him? Katya looked at her for a long moment. Because, she said quietly, he does not want you to feel that he is behind every door you open in his house. Arya's throat tightened. Thank you, she managed. Katya nodded. No smile. just the nod. They passed through a library, floor-to-ceiling books, half of them old, half of them new, a single leather armchair angled toward a cold fireplace, and up a narrow set of back stairs, and then through a door into a suite that made Arya stop walking. 3 rooms, a sitting area with a low couch and a pair of deep chairs, a bedroom through an archway with a bed too big for one person and curtains the color of wet stone, a bathroom beyond that, all marble and brass, a deep tub already steaming faintly under a layer of something herbal, and on the sitting room table, a tray, covered bowl, bread, a glass pitcher of water with slices of cucumber floating in it, a cup of what smelled like chicken broth. "If you prefer something else," Katya began. "This is fine," Arya said. "This is more than fine." Katya set a small folder on the table beside the tray. "In here," she said, "are 2 things. A phone. It is new. The number is not connected to your name. Only 4 people have this number. Myself, the driver, Mr. Volkov, and him. You may use it to call anyone you wish. The second thing is a key. It is to this suite. It is the only key other than the one I carry, and I will not use mine without your permission except in the event of fire. What if he wants to come in? He will not come in. What if I ask him to?" Katya's mouth moved very slightly, not a smile, the memory of a smile. "Then that is your business, Miss Vance, and you will find the key in your hand." She stepped back toward the door. "There is one more thing," she said. "I am to tell you, from him, that he will be in the library downstairs for the next hour. After that he will go to his study. He says," Katya paused, as though the next words were not native to her mouth, "that he will wait as long as it takes, and that if you do not come down tonight, he will not take offense." Arya sat down on the edge of the couch. Her legs had, without asking permission, decided to stop holding her up. "Okay," she said. "Lock the door, Miss Vance." Katya left. The latch clicked behind her. For a long minute, Arya did not move. The suite was very quiet. Somewhere in the walls a pipe ticked. Outside, a branch tapped once against the window and then gave up. She stared at the tray, at the bowl, at the small folder with the phone and the key inside it. Then she did the thing she had been needing to do for the last 45 minutes. She went into the bathroom, closed the door, slid down against it, and cried. It was not a pretty cry. It was not a cinematic cry. It was the ugly kind, the kind her mother used to call a purge, the kind that came up out of somewhere low in the gut and did not care what it looked like on its way out. She pressed the heel of her hand into her mouth so the sound wouldn't carry. She cried for her mother, who would have had opinions about this night. She cried for the girl in the navy dress who had walked into the Hartley Grand Ballroom thinking the worst thing that could happen was being ignored. She cried for the way her father had not answered when she'd asked him, "Did you?" She cried because the answer had been in his face. When she was done, she was not done, but she had run out of whatever fuel had been doing the crying, and she sat on the cold tile floor and breathed. Eventually she stood up, washed her face, looked in the mirror. The lipstick was, in fact, still there, slightly smudged at the corner. She rubbed at it with the pad of her thumb, and then, on some instinct she didn't examine, took the whole thing off with a piece of tissue until her mouth was bare. She did not look younger without it. She looked, she thought, more honest. She went back out to the sitting room, opened the folder, and picked up the phone. It was a newer model than the one she'd been using. Clean. No fingerprints on the screen, not even hers yet. She turned it on, and the 4 numbers were already in it. Katya, driver, Volkov, L, just L. She stared at that for a while, then she ate half the broth, drank the water, and walked downstairs. The house had a rhythm she was already starting to learn. The rug swallowed her footsteps. The lamps along the hall had been dimmed, not off, as though someone had decided she might come down and wanted the path to be easy. At the foot of the back stair she hesitated. Then she turned into the library. He was there, not at the desk, not posed. He was in the leather armchair, one ankle crossed over the opposite knee, a glass of something amber resting on the arm of the chair. His jacket was gone. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and she saw, on the inside of his right forearm, the edge of a tattoo, dark, geometric, something she couldn't read. He had a book open in his lap. He did not look up immediately. He gave her, Arya realized, the courtesy of a moment in the doorway to decide whether she wanted to be seen or not. I changed my mind about the water, she said. I'd like something stronger. Wine? Whiskey? Something else? Whatever you're having. He closed the book, set it on the side table, stood, walked to a low cabinet on the far wall, and poured her a measure of something from a heavy decanter. When he brought it to her, he held the glass out slowly so she could take it without their fingers touching. She noticed. She took the glass. Sit, he said, or stand, whatever you want. She sat, not next to him, across from him, on the couch opposite. The fire in the hearth was not lit, but someone had laid it, and the paper curled neatly under the kindling like a promise. She took a sip of whatever it was. It burned clean, then warmed slowly. Talk, she said. He took a breath, and there was, for the first time, a shadow of tiredness in him. All right, he said. I'll start with what you already know, so you can check me. Your father is Gregory Vance. He owns Vance Holdings, which is mostly shipping and some real estate. His wife, not your mother, is Vivian Ashford, formerly of Ashford Pharmaceuticals, which her family sold off about 9 years ago for reasons no one in the family likes to discuss. You have one half-sister, Celeste, from Vivian's first marriage, legally adopted by your father when Celeste was 11. And you are Gregory's daughter by Eleanor Cassidy, who was a set designer and who died 4 years ago. Arya's hand tightened on the glass. Eleanor, she said quietly. No one at that house says her name. I know. How do you know? Because I had people find out. I'll tell you who, if you want. I'll tell you when, if you want. I won't pretend I didn't. That's part of what I wanted to say first. She nodded slowly. That, at least, she could work with. Okay, she said. He went on. Your father's company is not in good shape. This is not widely known. He has kept it from his board, from most of his investors, and from his own wife. He is 6 months away from a debt call he cannot meet, on a loan he took 3 years ago from a private lender whose name I will not say in this room, because names have weight. In approximately 5 months, that lender is going to decide whether to forgive a percentage of that debt in exchange for a consideration Gregory has been quietly offering. He stopped. He looked at her. Say it, she said. You. She closed her eyes. Not marriage, in the old sense, Lucian said, his voice level. Not officially. A long engagement, publicized, to a man in that lender's organization. It would have bought your father time. It would have tied 2 families together in a way that made the debt politically awkward to collect. You were the asset. The engagement itself was going to be announced this spring, at a smaller gala I believe your stepmother is already planning the flowers for. Arya opened her eyes. Who is the man? She said. I don't want to say his name yet. Why not? Because the moment you know it, I lose a small amount of leverage over what happens next. And I need that leverage, Arya. Not over you, over him. Say it anyway. He looked at her for a moment. Anton Reyes, he said. The name hit her like something she'd already been carrying. She didn't know Anton Reyes. But she knew the face when she thought about it. He had come to the house once, 3 months ago, for what Gregory had called drinks with an associate. He had been polite. He had sat on the edge of the couch next to her and asked her what she read. He had touched the inside of her wrist, very briefly, when he'd said goodbye. She had thought at the time that it had been a mistake, a hand that had forgotten where it was supposed to stop. She set the glass down because her hand was shaking again. So you knew, she said. You knew he was going to, that my father was going to. I knew what was being prepared, Lucian said. I have known for about 11 weeks. And you didn't warn me. No. Why? Because if I had sent you a message or a man and said your father is planning this, you would have done one of 2 things. You would have assumed I was lying, or you would have gone to him, and he would have denied it, and then the whole thing would have been accelerated and done quietly somewhere I could not interrupt it. I could not save you with a letter, Arya. I could only save you in a room where everyone could see it happen. That's convenient for you? Yes. She laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. At least you don't lie about that, she said. I'm trying very hard, Lucian said, not to lie about any of it. I'm probably going to fail. I want you to understand that too. She stared at him. Why are you telling me this? She said. Why not? Why not play the kind man? Why not pretend you saved me out of the goodness of your heart? Because I don't have one of those, Lucian said. And you'd find out, and you'd leave, and I'd lose you. He said it so plainly that she didn't know how to answer. She looked at the fire that wasn't lit. You said 3 reasons, she said after a moment. I did. 2 about my father. Yes. What are they? 1 is the debt. Gregory Vance owes money, as I said, to a man whose organization I have been fighting in a very quiet way for about 4 years. If that debt converts into an alliance through your engagement, it strengthens him. If the debt simply collapses, I benefit. You standing next to me tonight collapses it, because your father cannot marry you to Anton Reyes if you are already publicly under another man's protection. That is the first reason. And the second is older. There is a piece of your mother's life, he said carefully, that your father has spent a great deal of money to bury. I don't know all of it. I know enough to know that when it comes up, and it will come up because I intend to help it come up, it will hurt him badly. You are not the reason for that, but your name will be part of how it comes out. I want you to know that before it does, so that you can decide whether you want to be part of it or not. Her throat closed. Something about my mother, she said. Yes. What? Not tonight. Lucien, yes, not tonight. His voice was firm but not cruel. You have had a very long evening. I will not dump a second grief on you in the same hour. I promise I will tell you. I promise it will be soon. Tonight, I need you to be able to sleep. Her eyes burned. She refused to cry again. She had done her crying. And the third reason, she whispered. You said 1 was about me. He was quiet for a long time. I saw you, he said, 6 months ago, in a coffee shop on 5th, the one on the corner near the old theater. You didn't notice me. I was 3 tables away. You were reading a book, and a man at the counter was yelling at the barista over a wrong order, and the barista was a kid, maybe 19, and she was starting to cry. You stood up. You did not raise your voice. You walked up to the counter, you put yourself between them, and you told him very quietly that he had a choice. He could apologize to her, or he could leave, but he could not do both of the other things he was doing. He left. And then you stood there for about 30 seconds with your back to me, and I watched your hand shake against the counter, and you didn't let her see. Arya didn't move. I remember that, she whispered. I paid for your coffee when you went back to your table. The barista didn't tell you. I asked her not to. She stared at him. That's not a reason, she said. That's a story. It's the reason I walked into the Hartley tonight instead of sending someone else to do it. Lucien, I didn't orchestrate what you were going to do in that coffee shop, Arya. I saw it happen, and I thought there is a person in the middle of the Vance house who is not like the rest of them. I went home that night, and I had my people look you up. That is when I learned about Anton Reyes, and about your father's debt, and about your mother. That is the order it happened in. I want you to know that too. I did not build a trap for you. I found you in the middle of one someone else had built, and I decided I was going to walk into it on purpose. The room was very quiet. Arya pressed the heel of her hand against her eye, hard, for a second. Then she let it drop. I don't know what to do with what you just said, she said. I don't need you to do anything with it. Then why say it? Because I told you earlier I was going to try not to lie. This is me trying. She breathed. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. The fire still wasn't lit. She stared at it anyway. You said I have a choice, she said after a while. That was the word you used, in the hallway. You said, stand alone and be used, or stand beside me and, what did you say? Reshape the game. I did say that. That's not a choice. That's a slogan. A small thing in his face moved. Not quite a laugh. Almost. Fair, he said. Tell me the real choice. In small words. He set his own glass down. He leaned forward slightly, forearms on his knees, and the tattoo on his right arm resolved itself into something she still couldn't read, some kind of script, dense and deliberate. The real choice, he said, is this. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to make a statement. It is going to say that you are under my protection. It is not going to say that we are engaged unless you want it to. It is not going to say that we are involved unless you want it to. It is only going to say to everyone who reads these things that any action taken against you will be treated as an action against me. That alone buys you a month, maybe 2. In that time, your father cannot complete the deal with Reyes because Reyes will not move against me for a woman. He likes his knees. Charming. I can say it less charmingly if you like. No, keep going. In that month, you have options. If you want to disappear, I will help you disappear. Real disappear. New name, new city, money in an account under that new name, a job if you want a job, an apartment if you want one. You will never hear from me again unless you want to. That is one. And the other? The other is you stay. You learn. You find out what your father actually did to your mother. You find out what Reyes actually is. You find out what I actually am. And at the end of it, if you decide that some version of standing beside me is what you want, we build it together on terms we both write. If you decide it isn't, you take the disappearing option with whatever you've learned, and my door closes behind you, and I don't come looking. She was silent for a long time. Those aren't equal choices, she said finally. No. You're offering me the second one. You want me to take it. Yes? Why? Because, he said, I don't particularly like being alone. That was not the answer she had expected. It was not grand. It was not strategic. It sat there in the air between them, small and plain and true, and she didn't know what to do with that either. She picked up her glass, took another sip. The burn had gone warmer now, more like a hand on the back of her neck than a fire in her throat. What does tomorrow look like? She said. You sleep in. Katya will bring breakfast whenever you want it. Around 10, I will ask you to sit with me for 20 minutes while a statement goes out. You don't have to be on camera. You don't have to be photographed. You only have to read it and tell me if anything in it is wrong or feels wrong, and I will change it. After that, you have the day. The house is yours. The garden is yours. There's a pool if you like pools. The library is, obviously, yours. I will be in and out. I have meetings I can't cancel. I would prefer not to cancel them, because the people at them need to see that tonight did not rattle me. Did it? Did what? Rattle you. He looked at her, and something old and very careful in his face slid sideways for just a moment. Yes, he said. Why? Because I'd only planned for 2 outcomes tonight. I hadn't planned for you to walk into my library and ask me to keep going when you could have just eaten the broth and gone to sleep. She didn't answer that. She didn't know how. The fire still wasn't lit. She set her glass down, and the sound of it on the wood was very small in the quiet room. I'm not saying yes to you, she said. I know. I'm saying yes to the month. I know that too. I want to see my father. He went still. When? Soon. Not tomorrow. Soon. I have questions for him that aren't going to get answered secondhand. I don't want you to send someone. I don't want you to handle it for me. I want to sit across a table from him, in a room I choose, with you in the building, but not in the room, and I want to ask him myself. Arya, Those are my terms, Lucien. For the month. I get to do that. He studied her for a long moment. Okay, he said. Okay? Okay. You get to do that. I will help you pick the room. She nodded once. She did not trust herself to say anything more. She stood up, and her legs were shaking again, very faintly, but she did not sit back down. I'm going to bed, she said. Good night, Arya. She paused at the doorway, one hand on the frame. She did not turn around. Lucien? Yes? The woman, Katya. She said you told her there was a chance I was coming. Not that I would. A chance. That's right. What did you think the chance was? He took a second. About 1 in 4, he said. That low. You didn't know me. You had no reason to come. Then why did you prepare the whole wing? Because 1 in 4, he said, is still worth preparing for. She stayed in the doorway 1 more second. Then she walked out. Upstairs she did not bathe. She did not eat more of the broth. She did not turn on the television that she'd seen in the corner of the sitting room. She took off the navy dress and folded it and put it on a chair, and it looked like a flag she had already stopped saluting. She put on a robe Katya had left out, cream, soft, too big for her in the shoulders. She crawled into the bed that was too big for one person, and she did not sleep, not for a long time. She lay on her side and watched the window, where the branch had stopped tapping, and she listened to the house settle around her, a house she did not know, belonging to a man she did not know, in which she had, for the first time in her life, been offered a door with a key she controlled. She cried once more, quietly, barely. Then she did sleep. She woke to soft light and the smell of coffee. Katya had left a tray quietly in the sitting room. Fresh fruit, a small pot, 2 slices of toast, a folded newspaper, and on the paper a single yellow sticky note in black ink. Front page. Take your time. L. Arya picked the paper up. She was, in fact, on the front page, not the center, not the largest. A photograph, grainy, taken from some distance, of 2 figures mid-kiss in the middle of the Hartley ballroom. She could not see her own face clearly. She could see Lucien's hand on her jaw, and the back of her head, and the halo of people around them. The headline said, Drakov claims Vance heiress in shock public gesture. She read the word heiress 3 times. No one had ever put that word next to her name before. She read the article. It said very little that was actually known, a lot of speculation. A quote from an anonymous guest who had called it the most calculated romantic move this city has seen in a decade. A quote from someone who claimed to be close to Gregory Vance, refusing to comment. No quote from Lucien, no quote from Arya. A short paragraph at the bottom noting that a formal statement was expected later that morning. She set the paper down. She ate half a piece of toast. Then she went into the bathroom and, for the first time, looked at herself in daylight in that mirror. She was pale. Her eyes were rimmed. Her hair was a mess from sleeping on it wet, except she hadn't washed it, so it was just a mess from sleeping. She did not look like an heiress. She looked like a 23-year-old woman who had made a large decision the night before and was still deciding whether to regret it. She decided tentatively not to. She showered. She dressed in clothes she found in the wardrobe. Simple things, a sweater, dark trousers, soft flats, all of them somehow in her size, which was a fact she chose not to examine too hard yet. She went down to find him. He was in the library again, at the desk this time, jacket on, phone in his hand. He looked up when she came in, and something in his face, not relief, but the shape of relief, flickered and was gone. "Morning," he said. "Morning. Did you sleep?" Eventually. "Good. I read the paper." "And?" "It called me an heiress." "It did." "I'm not." "You are, on paper. Your father set up a trust in your mother's name that he has been administering. I had my lawyers confirm it last night. It is smaller than the paper would suggest, and he has been drawing from it in ways that are probably legal and definitely ugly. But yes, technically. I didn't know that." "I know." She walked to the desk. She did not sit. "Give me the statement," she said. He slid a single sheet of paper across to her. She read it. It was short. It was clean. It said, in 3 paragraphs, that as of the previous evening, Arya Vance was under the personal protection of Lucien Drakov and the Drakov organization, that any action, communication, or attempt at contact that she had not personally welcomed would be considered an action against him, and that further information about the nature of their relationship would be shared, if at all, at a time and in a manner of their own choosing. There was no mention of marriage, no mention of love, no mention of her father. "This is cold," she said. "It is." "Is that on purpose?" "Yes. I don't want Reyes to read anything soft in it. Soft is an opening." She read it again. "1 line," she said. "I want to add 1 line." "Add it." She took the pen from his desk. At the bottom, in small, careful letters, she wrote, "Miss Vance requests that her father, Gregory Vance, and his immediate household refrain from public statements on her behalf until she has personally spoken with him." She pushed the paper back across the desk. Lucien read it, once, twice. He looked up at her, and for the first time since she had met him, something that was genuinely close to a smile moved across his face. "That's going to hurt him a lot," he said. "Good." He nodded slowly. He picked up the phone. He made a call. He read the statement, including her line, to someone on the other end, and told them to release it in 7 minutes. Then he set the phone down. 7 minutes, he said. What happens in 7 minutes? Everything you were invisible for starts over, with you visible this time. She took a long breath. Okay, she said. She pulled out the chair across from his desk. She sat. She folded her hands. Then let's start over, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Yes, Lucian said. Let's. The phone on his desk began almost immediately to ring. He did not answer it. Neither did she. The phone did not stop ringing for 4 days. Not that phone specifically. Lucian let it wear itself out on the first afternoon and then had it sent to another room. And in the quiet that came after, Arya realized she had been flinching every time it started up. But other phones in other rooms picked up the work. Katya's ring, 2 halls over. A low, polite murmur at every hour. Volkov's, harsher, terser. The black phone on a side table in the library that Lucian answered sometimes with a word, and sometimes with a silence, and sometimes not at all. The world was, it turned out, loud about Arya Vance now. She had not expected that. She had expected. She didn't know what she had expected. Whispers, maybe. A line in a column. The same sort of ignoring that had shaped the first 23 years of her life, only with a new thing to ignore her for. Instead, her face was on 3 papers by Tuesday afternoon. Her old college ID photo surfaced from somewhere. A gossip channel she had never watched ran a segment she did not see, but that Katya, very dryly, told her had used the word Cinderella twice and the word concubine once. Concubine, Arya said. Katya said. She was folding a stack of linens that did not need folding because she had a habit of doing something with her hands when she was delivering news she didn't like. They are not very clever. I'm not his concubine. No. What am I? Katya stopped folding. You are, she said. Arya Vance. That is what you are. Everything else is a hat someone is trying to put on your head. You do not have to wear any of them. Arya sat with that for the rest of the day. Lucian had not lied about the meetings. On the morning of the second day, she came down to find the house already moving around her. A black SUV at the gate, 2 men she had not seen before in the front hall with coats over their arms. Volkov issuing instructions in low Russian to someone on the other end of a headset. Lucien himself, in a suit darker than the charcoal one, was standing at a side table, reading something off a folder while a woman in a gray pantsuit pointed at one of the lines and said a name Arya didn't catch. He looked up when he saw her on the stair. I won't be back until late, he said. Is that all right? Is that a question you actually want an answer to, or are you being polite? He almost laughed. It was not a laugh, but it was the movement of a laugh. I actually want an answer, he said. Then, yes, it's fine. Go. Katya has my secondary number. If you need anything, go, Lucien. He went. That was the pattern of the first week. He was in the house in fragments, morning coffee, sometimes, the 2 of them across the long kitchen island with the newspaper between them. An hour in the library before bed, reading in separate chairs, not talking. A silence that had started out unbearable and then, somehow, become the first silence of her life that had not asked her to prove anything. They did not touch. He did not try. Once, when she reached across him for the salt at dinner, her wrist brushed the back of his hand, and he moved his hand very slightly to give her room. The movement was so automatic, so worn, that she thought about it for 2 days afterwards. Her own phone, the old one, was a graveyard. She looked at it on the 3rd day finally, when Katya, who had not asked anything about it, walked past her door and paused long enough to say, You can read them or you can burn them, but leaving them unread is its own decision, and then walked on. Arya sat on the edge of the bed and scrolled. Gregory. 41 messages. She read the first. Arya, please call me. This has gotten out of hand. She read the last. Arya, I don't know what he has told you. Some of it will be true. Most of it will not. You don't know this man. I am begging you to come home before you do something that cannot be undone. He had used the word begging. Gregory Vance had used the word begging. She read that message 3 times because she could not remember the last time he had used a verb that put him in a smaller position than her. He wrote, I love you, honey, at the end of it, and she stared at honey for a long time because he had not called her honey since she was maybe 9, and it felt, reading it now, like a word he had dug out of a drawer specifically for this. She did not reply. Vivian's messages were different. You have humiliated this family. You have humiliated your father. You have no idea what you have done. Celeste is beside herself. Your father has not eaten in 2 days, you selfish child. Come home. And on the second day, a line that made Arya's hand go cold against the screen. If you do not come home this week, you will find that the door is closed in a way your mother would have understood. Arya read that one twice. She put the phone down. She picked it up again. She screenshotted it. She took the screenshot and walked barefoot down the long hall and into the library. Lucien was at his desk, for once, in the middle of the day. There was a tall, thin man in glasses sitting across from him. A lawyer, she assumed. She had seen him twice before. And the two of them looked up when she came in. I need a minute, she said. Lucien looked at the lawyer. The lawyer stood, nodded to Arya, and left without being told. Arya walked over, put the phone down on Lucien's desk, face up, screenshot open. He read it. A muscle moved in his jaw. That was the only thing she saw move. When did this come in? He said. Yesterday. Do you know what she means? No, but I know it means something. She doesn't threaten when she's bluffing. She threatens when she has a card. He looked up at her. You want to do the meeting? He said. Yes. Now. Yes. Your father? My father, but not in his house and not in yours. Somewhere neither of us lives. You pick the building, I pick the room. He nodded. Give me 24 hours, he said. Fine. She turned to go. At the door she stopped. She did not turn around. Lucien. Yes. The thing you said about my mother, the thing you said you'd tell me soon. Silence. It's going to be in this meeting, she said. It can be. Is it a thing that makes me hate him? That's not my call. Is it a thing that should make me hate him? He took a long breath. Yes, he said. She nodded without turning around and walked out. The meeting was set for Friday, in a building she had never been inside. It was a law office, old stone, one of those narrow, quiet places in the financial district that looked like nothing from the outside and smelled inside like leather and mint, and a kind of money that didn't need to shout. The conference room they put her in was on the 7th floor, long table, cream walls, a single piece of art on the back wall, a small muted landscape, nothing you would remember. Water carafe on the table, 4 glasses, no food, no flowers, no softness anywhere. Arya had picked the room. She had wanted it to look exactly like this. She arrived first, on purpose. Lucien walked her up from the car, stopped at the door, met her eyes. You want me in there? No. I'll be 2 doors down. Good. Arya. Yes. If at any point you want me to come in, you knock on the wall behind your chair twice. Volkov will hear it. He'll come get me. Okay. If you want me to leave the building entirely, 3 knocks. 3 knocks is leave. 3 knocks is leave. She nodded. He did not touch her. She was grateful again for the small discipline of his hands. I'm going to be fine, she said. I know. I'm going to be fine, Lucien. I said I know. He left. She sat at the head of the table, not the side, the head. She had thought about this. She had the door on her left and the window on her right, and the empty chair for her father directly in her line of sight at the far end. She poured herself a glass of water. She drank half of it. She set the glass down and folded her hands and waited. Gregory Vance came in 11 minutes later, alone, which surprised her. He looked smaller. That was the first thing she thought, and she made herself examine it because she knew the feeling could be a trick. Sometimes, when you had only seen a person from below your whole life, it took one afternoon of looking at them straight on for your brain to shrink them. This was partly that, and it was partly not. He had lost weight. His shirt collar sat looser on his neck than she remembered. His hair, which she had always thought of as iron gray, was pure gray now, and the roots of it looked thinner against his scalp. He had cut himself shaving. There was a small dark spot under his jaw, and he had covered it badly with something. Arya. Sit down, Dad. He hesitated at the door, then he walked to the far chair and sat. Thank you, he said, for agreeing to this. Don't thank me. I didn't do it for you. He nodded. He put his hands flat on the table in front of him. It was a gesture she had seen him make in 100 meetings. He was a table flattener, a man who used his hands as weights against the wood when he wanted the room to settle. In this room it looked different. It looked like he was holding the table still so it wouldn't move. I don't know where to start, he said. Start with Anton Reyes. His head jerked up. Who told Dad? Arya, start with Anton Reyes. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, something in him had already decided to be honest. She saw the switch flip. She knew him well enough still to see it. I was going to introduce you to him, he said. You did introduce me to him. 3 months ago, in the living room. He touched my wrist when he left. Gregory winced, a full-body wince, small and real. I told him not to, he said quietly. I told him. You told him not to what? Exactly. Not to be too obvious? Not to scare me off before you'd wrap the bow? That's not fair, Arya. It might not be fair. Is it accurate? He did not answer. She nodded. She poured him a glass of water because her mother had taught her that you offered water to a man who was being honest even if you hated him, because the water made it easier for him to keep being honest. She slid the glass across the table. He didn't touch it. Why? She said. You know why. Say it, Dad. Say it in this room to me. The company, he said, is in trouble. How much trouble? The kind you don't come back from without help. How much money? He said a number. It was a large number, larger than she had expected. She did not let that show on her face. She had practiced not letting things show on her face for a very long time, and she let the practice work for her now. And Reyes was the help. Reyes's people, yes. And what was I? Arya? What was I in the deal, Dad? He put his face in his hands, briefly. Not for long. When he took them away, his eyes were wet, and she noted that and did not let herself feel it yet. You were a piece of it, he said. A piece. The social piece. The families would... I was the marriage. Yes. You were going to promise me to a man I had met once for 20 minutes, so he would forgive what you owe his organization. I was going to ask you. When? After the engagement party. You were going to ask me after the engagement party. I was going to tell you, he said, that we had an opportunity and that Anton was interested in you, and that if you were willing, it would help the family very much, and that if you were not willing, we would find another... You would have found another way. Yes. Dad. Yes. You are a bad liar now, and you used to be a very good one. What changed? He looked at her. You did, he said. She waited. She did not fill the silence. She had learned that from him. The night at the Hartley, he said, when he kissed you in front of all those people, when you walked out of that room holding his hand, I came home, and I sat in my study, and I realized I could not remember the last time I had actually looked at you. I don't mean looked at you, I mean looked. I don't know what color your eyes are, Arya. I had to ask Vivian. I had to ask my wife what color my daughter's eyes are, and she didn't know either, and I sat in that chair, and I was ashamed in a way I have not been ashamed in 20 years. She let him finish. Gray? She said. What? My eyes. They're gray, like Mom's. He closed his eyes again. I know, he said after a moment. I do know. I did know. I wanted to see if you would tell me. Don't play games with me, Dad. Not today. I don't have the patience. I'm not playing. He rubbed his face. I am trying, very badly, to speak to you like an adult and not like a thing I damaged. She held that one for a long moment. Then tell me about Mom, she said. He went still. What about her? Don't do that. Don't make me pull it out of you. Tell me what you did to her. His hand moved a fraction of an inch on the table. Arya saw it. Who told you? He said. Not who. What? Arya? What, Dad? He did not speak for a long time. He was not stalling, exactly. It was more like she could see him walking, in his own head, down a hallway he had kept locked for a lot of years, looking for the right door. Your mother, he said at last, was not supposed to keep you. Arya went very cold. Meaning what? Meaning, he said, and his voice had gone thin, that when she told me she was pregnant, I was married to Vivian. I had been married to Vivian for 5 years. Celeste was 7. I had a life. Eleanor was... Your mother was something I was not supposed to have. And I had her anyway, and then she came to me and she said, I'm pregnant, and I... What did you do, Dad? I asked her not to keep you. Arya's hand closed around the water glass. She did not lift it. And she said no. She said no. And then what? And then I had people, he said, and his voice broke for the first time, offer her money, to leave, to go somewhere else, to raise you without me in the picture. It was a lot of money, Arya. It was a lot of money and a house in another state and an income for your entire childhood. And she said no. And then I had people offer her more. And she said no again. And then He stopped. Then you what? I had a lawyer draft papers. What kind of papers? That if she kept you, she waived. She waived any claim to me, financial, legal, anything. And she signed them. She signed them. Arya breathed. In for 4, out for 4. So when she was dying, she said, and her voice was very steady, and we couldn't afford her treatment, and I came to you, and I asked you, and you told me you'd already done what you could. I had already given her more than the papers required. You had already given her what you decided was fair. Arya, you let my mother die of a treatable cancer because a piece of paper you made her sign when she was 24 years old said you didn't have to pay for her. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Dad? It was complicated. Say the number. What number? The number it would have cost you to keep her alive another 2 years. You know it. You're the kind of man who knows exactly what number it would have been. Say it. He said it. It was against the number he had given her earlier for his own debt. A very small number. A number she could see very clearly, him having paid without noticing. She set the glass down. Her hand, when she set it down, was perfectly steady. She noticed that and filed it away. Thank you, she said. Arya, thank you for telling me, Dad. I mean it. I didn't think you would. I loved your mother. Okay, I loved her. I heard you the first time. Arya, please, Dad. Yes. There's one more thing. He looked at her, exhausted, hollowed, a man at the bottom of a thing he had been falling into for a long time. What? Vivian sent me a message 2 days ago. She said if I didn't come home, I would find the door closed in a way my mother would have understood. What did she mean? His face changed. That was when Arya knew, finally, that there was a thing in this story that her father had not yet said, a thing that was not just his. Because she had watched him, for the last 20 minutes, walk into every dark corner of himself with her, and this one, when she named it, was a corner he had not been expecting to have to walk into. He started. Don't! Arya, don't lie to me right now. You said you were trying to speak to me like an adult. Do it! He put his hands on the table again. They were shaking. Vivian, he said, told your mother something before your mother died. I don't know what it was exactly. Your mother came to me afterwards and she was very upset. She asked me if it was true. I said no. I wasn't sure what she was asking. I thought it was about money. I thought Vivian had told her about the papers. I said no. And your mother looked at me the way you are looking at me right now, and she said, Greg, tell me you didn't know about the other baby. Arya's breath stopped. The other baby, she said. I didn't know what she meant, Gregory said. I swear to you, Arya, on whatever you want me to swear on. I did not know what she meant. I asked her, and she would not say. She left. She died 3 weeks later. I asked Vivian. Vivian told me your mother was delirious on the medication, and I wanted to believe her. I let myself believe her. And I have spent 4 years not asking the question again, because I am a coward. Arya stared at him. There was another baby, she said. I don't know. Before me, after me, whose? I don't know, Arya. I have told you everything I know. She looked at him for a long moment. She did not think he was lying. That was somehow worse. She stood up. Gregory stood too fast, and his chair made a small scraping noise. Arya, sit down, Dad. Please, sit. He sat. I'm going to ask you to do one thing for me, she said. You're going to go home. You're going to tell Vivian that I know about the papers, and you are going to tell her that I know she said something to Mom. You are not going to ask her what it was. You are going to let her think about it for 1 week. That is all. And then? And then I'm going to ask her myself. Arya, she will not tell you. Not if she didn't tell me. She will. How can you? Because, Arya said, I will not be the girl she sent the message to. The next time she sees me, she is going to understand that. Gregory stared at her. You're not coming home, he said. No. You're staying with him. I'm staying with myself, Dad. He just happens to own the house I'm standing in. Arya, this man, don't. You don't know what he is. I know what you are. He flinched. That's not fair. You keep saying that word. She walked to the door, stopped, did not turn around. Mom's medical records, she said. You still have them? Yes. Send them to this building, to the firm downstairs, by the end of the day. All of them. Every scan, every note, every hospital bill you paid, and every one you didn't. I want to read them myself. Why? Because I want to know what it would have cost to save her, Dad. Not the version you've told yourself, the version the doctors wrote down. I want to know the real number. He did not answer. By the end of the day, she said. She opened the door. She walked out. She did not let the door slam because slamming it would have been something he could have told a story about later. She slammed the door. And she did not want him to have the story. She closed it soft. She walked down the corridor on legs that were, to her great surprise, not shaking. She turned the corner, and there was Lucien, standing with his back against the wall, hands in his pockets, reading the same muted landscape on the far end of the hall that was a twin of the one she had sat under. He straightened when he saw her. He did not ask her anything. Is there somewhere in this building, she said very carefully, where I can break something that doesn't matter? Yes. Take me there. He took her down one floor, to a small empty office with boxes along one wall, glass-fronted bookshelves, a standing lamp, dust in the corners. Nobody used it. He closed the door behind them, looked around, and picked up a heavy ceramic mug off a shelf that she guessed had been left behind by someone who had retired or been fired. This one, he said, handing it to her. She threw it against the opposite wall. It shattered hard. Pieces went everywhere. The noise was enormous in the small room. She stood in the middle of it with her hands empty and her chest heaving, and to her own astonishment, she was not crying. She was furious. It was a clean kind of furious. It had a shape and a direction, and it was not pointed at herself, which was a new kind of fury for her, and she let it fill her whole chest and settle there, warm and bright and perfectly manageable. Lucien was watching her. Another one? He said. No. Okay. She sat down on the floor against the wall, in the dust, in the navy trousers she had dressed so carefully in that morning. Lucien, after a moment, came and sat down next to her. Not close. Close enough. He told me, she said. About your mother. Yes. And about the papers. And about the fact that Vivian said something to my mother before she died. And that there may have been another baby, and he doesn't know whose it was, and I don't think he was lying. Lucien was silent for a long time. That's the part I didn't know yet, he said. Which part? The other baby. You didn't know? No. Lucien, do not lie to me about this. I am not lying to you, Arya. I knew your mother had tried to tell your father something in her last weeks. I did not know what. I had guesses. None of them were a baby. She believed him. She didn't want to. She did. So what now? She said. Now, he said, you decide how big this fight gets. Meaning Vivian is not a small fight. Meaning if there is another child, there are reasons she did not tell you, and those reasons will have teeth. Meaning if we go at her the way you just went at him, she will not fold because your father loves you and she does not. I'm aware that she does not love me, Lucien. I know. Then say what you actually mean. He turned his head and looked at her. I mean that tonight you stop being the girl who got rescued at a party. I mean that the next time you walk into a room with any of these people in it, you walk in not as someone he is protecting, but as someone who is building something of her own. I mean that you do not, for the rest of this, have a single conversation where your leverage is only me. We start making your leverage yours. How? You come to the meetings. Not all of them. The ones I choose. You listen, you watch the people. You learn what deals look like when they're real and what they look like when they're theater. We get you your own lawyer. We get you into your mother's trust. We find out what your father has been drawing from it, and we make that public, in the right room, at the right time. And we find out who Vivian sent to your mother's hospital room the week before she died, because somebody walked in, and that somebody is where the other baby comes from. Bato. You think Vivian? I think Vivian Ashford has spent 9 years pretending her family sold that pharmaceutical company for clean reasons. And I think she has spent 4 years pretending she did not threaten a dying woman in a hospital bed. And I think she wrote you a message this week that said the door is closed in a way your mother would have understood. And I think she does not know yet that she is not speaking to the girl she thinks she's speaking to. Arya laughed. It came up out of her without permission. It was not a nice laugh. It was short and jagged, and it felt very good. Okay, she said. Okay, Lucien, let's build me. He nodded. First lesson, he said. Yes. Your father is going to call you tonight. He's going to cry. He's going to say things he means and things he doesn't. You are not going to pick up. Why? Because the worst thing you can do in a war with people like these is let them apologize to you before they have given up anything real. An apology before a concession is a coupon. You don't take coupons, you take concessions. Okay? Second lesson. Yes. Tomorrow, you and I are going to have our photograph taken together. On purpose. Controlled. At a small event we can leave when we want. You will not smile. You will not pose. You will stand next to me and look directly at the camera like a woman who has already decided how this ends. Why? Because the picture from the Hartley makes you look kissed. I want the next one to make you look dangerous. She looked at him. Lucien. Yes. Are you going to let me fall in love with you? She had not meant to ask it. It came up, the way the laugh had. He was quiet for a long time. I am not going to stop you, he said eventually, if that is what you decide to do. But I'm not going to ask for it either. You have already been asked for too many things you didn't get to weigh. You're not going to get that from me. That's not an answer. You keep saying that. Because you keep not answering. I'm answering the question you asked. Maybe you should ask a different one. Fine. Fine. Are you going to fall in love with me? He laughed. It was the first real laugh she had heard out of him. It was short and surprised, and it sounded, she thought, like a laugh that had not been used in a while and had gone a little rusty in the corners. Probably, he said. Probably. Probably? Lucien. Yes. That's a bigger answer than I was expecting. I know. She leaned her head back against the wall. She let her eyes close just for a second. The dust smelled like paper and old cleaning solution and a small trace of whatever that ceramic mug had last been washed with. It was, against everything, the first moment in 4 days she had felt quiet in her own body. Okay, she said. Tomorrow, photo. Day after, my lawyer. End of the week, Vivienne. End of the week is too fast. End of the week, Lucien. He looked at her for a long moment. All right, he said. End of the week. She opened her eyes, looked at the ceramic shards scattered across the floor. Who's going to clean that up? She said. Me. You. It's my building. Of course it is. She stood up. She brushed the dust off the back of her trousers. She offered him her hand, and he took it, and she pulled him to his feet, which took more of her weight than she'd expected. And the brief impression she had, very briefly, was that he had let her pull him up on purpose, that a man built the way he was did not need a small woman's hand to stand, and that he had taken hers anyway because he had understood somehow that she needed to be the one doing the pulling today. She did not thank him for it. She did not have to. They walked out of the small, dusty office together. They took the elevator down. Outside, the black car was waiting, and Volkov was holding the door, and the sky over the city had gone the soft silver of late afternoon. Arya Vance got into the car on her own side. She did not wait for it to be held for her. Behind them, on the 7th floor, her father was still sitting at that table. She did not look up at the window. Home, Lucien said to Volkov. The car pulled away. Lucien, she said without looking at him. Yes. One more thing. Yes. I want the other baby found before the week is out. Whoever that child is, whatever they have become, I want to know. He did not answer right away. "Arya," he said, "if that child exists and is alive, that is a person who is probably not looking for us. That is a person who might have a life. You want to walk into it." "I want to know. I'm asking you to be sure." She turned her head and looked at him. "My mother," she said very quietly, "died asking my father a question about this. I am not going to die without an answer to it. Find them." He held her gaze for a long second. "Okay," he said. He turned to the window. Outside, the city slid past, long and gray and full of buildings that did not yet know her name. And above them, somewhere, in a nursery, or a classroom, or an office, or a grave, there was a person whose life was about to be rearranged the way hers had been. And Arya Vance sat in the back seat of a black car on a silver afternoon and let herself feel, for the first time, not only what had been done to her, but what she was capable of doing back. The photograph went out on Wednesday morning. Arya had not slept well the night before. She had sat up in the library with Lucien until almost 2, reading the legal summary of her mother's trust. 41 pages, dense as concrete, broken up with little parenthetical clauses that turned out, on a second read, to be the most important parts of the whole document. Her father had been withdrawing against it for 9 years. Not all at once. Small, regular amounts, quarterly, the kind of draws that did not show up on a single statement but added up, over a decade, to roughly a third of what Eleanor Cassidy had believed she was leaving her daughter. "He used the word custodian in these filings," Lucien had said, pointing to a line. "Custodian is not the word he was legally. Custodian is the word you use when you're pretending you're a custodian." He wasn't. He was a trustee with a fiduciary obligation. He has been, for a lot of years, treating it like an allowance account. For what? For your upbringing. He'll argue that in court. He'll say private school, he'll say clothes, he'll say the tutor he hired you for one summer when you were 15. "My stepmother hired the tutor." "Your stepmother," Lucien said, "will not say so." Arya had stared at the page. "Can I take this from him?" she said. "Yes." Quietly. Not quietly. Cleanly, yes. Quietly, no. He's going to fight it because the moment you do it, his accountants are going to understand that there is someone looking at his books who is no longer on his side. Good. Lucien had looked at her for a long second. "Arya," he said. "Yes." "You have gone from, 'I don't want to make this ugly,' to 'good' in about 72 hours. I had a conversation with my father, Lucien. I know. I'm allowed." "You're allowed." She had laughed, tired, ugly, real, and then they had worked for another hour, and she had gone up to her suite and slept in fits, and when she woke up on Wednesday morning, the photograph was already being staged in the front drive. It was a simple thing. No event, no red carpet, just a single photographer, a man named Hollis, who had worked with Lucien before, and who did not ask any questions he did not need the answer to, standing on the gravel with a camera that did not look expensive, but was, apparently, one of the most expensive small cameras in the city. Lucien had picked the dress for her himself. He had asked first, carefully, and she had said yes, she wanted to know how he saw her, and it was not what she'd expected. It was dark green, long-sleeved, high-necked, simple, nothing on it, no jewelry, hair down, no makeup to speak of, except for her mouth, which Katya had painted a very deep red that Arya did not recognize as her own in the mirror, and which, after a moment, she decided she did. She stood next to Lucien on the steps. "Don't smile," he said quietly as Hollis set the focus. "You said that already. I know. Should I look at you or at him?" "At him? At the lens, not through it, at it, like you're deciding what it's worth." She did. Hollis took 4 pictures. He showed Lucien the second one. Lucien looked. He tipped the screen so she could see. In the photograph, she did not look kissed. She did not look afraid. She looked like a woman standing in front of a house she had not yet decided to keep. "That one," Lucien said. "That one," Arya agreed. It went out at 9 a.m. with a single line of caption. Arya Vance, photographed at home, Wednesday morning. No other words. No explanation. No statement. By noon, it was on the front page of 4 papers. By 3 in the afternoon, Vivian Ashford had sent Arya her 18th message of the week. "I need to see you. Arya read it in the garden, sitting on a low stone bench with a cup of tea going cold in her hand. She read it twice. She put the phone down next to her on the stone. She picked up the tea, drank it anyway, and did not reply. Not yet. She was learning in those days the specific weight of not replying. It was a weight she had never been allowed to carry. Her whole life she had replied, to teachers, to Gregory, to Vivienne, to Celeste, to men at galas who touched her wrist when she was 12, because to not reply was to be rude, and rudeness was a thing she had been trained out of early. Now she was learning that there was a difference between rudeness and power, and that silence, wielded correctly, was not the absence of an answer. It was an answer that cost the other person more than a real one would have. She was also, in those days, learning other things. Lucien had not been joking about the meetings. On Thursday, he took her into a conference room downtown, 7th floor. Not the same building as her father's meeting, but close. 8 people at a long table, men in their 50s, 1 woman in her 40s, a younger man at the end taking notes. They were there to talk about a port. Arya did not know anything about ports. She had asked Lucien about it that morning, and he had said, "You're not there to speak, you're there to watch. I'm going to tell them who you are at the beginning, and then I want you to sit to my right and read every face in the room for the entire 2 hours, and afterwards we'll compare notes." What am I reading for? Who's bluffing? Who's actually angry? Who's performing anger because they think it'll move the price? Who came in knowing how this ends and is waiting for the rest of us to catch up? Lucien, you've been doing it since you were a child. You were doing it at the Hartley. You were doing it in your mother's hospital room. You do it every time you walk into a room with Vivienne in it. I'm just asking you to do it somewhere it counts. She did it. She sat at his right. He introduced her, at the start, with a single line. "Miss Vance is observing today. Proceed as you would." Nobody looked at her directly after that, but she saw 2 of the men, the older one in the navy suit and a thinner one with a bad shave, glance at her 3 times in the first 20 minutes. The woman in her 40s did not look at her at all, which was its own kind of looking. Arya watched their hands and their water glasses, and the way they said yes when they meant something else. She watched the thin man with the bad shave take a phone call he pretended was an emergency, and she watched him come back and say he had to leave, and she watched him leave, and 20 minutes later the deal moved significantly in Lucien's favor. Afterwards, in the car, Lucien said, "Tell me." She said, "The thin man wasn't called away. He wanted an excuse to leave before the number came up. He didn't want to say no in front of everyone. He wanted the room to say yes without him." Why? Because he owes the older man, navy suit, something personal, not money, something about a wife or a daughter, I couldn't tell. He couldn't vote against him to his face. Lucien was quiet for a long time. "That's exactly what happened," he said. "Is it?" "Yes." "How did you know?" "Because Navy Suit told me 2 months ago that he had something over the thin man and that he was going to use it in this meeting. I didn't know when. I knew today was possible." Arya turned in her seat. "You sent me into that room knowing the answer." "I sent you into that room," Lucien said, "to see if you could get to an answer I already had." "Which you did. In about 40 minutes. On a deal you didn't understand, in a room full of people who didn't want to be read." "Was that a test?" "Yes." "Did I pass?" He looked at her sideways, that almost smile again, and it had started to appear more often lately, in small, quick flickers, like a thing his face was remembering how to do. "You passed," he said. "Good." "Arya." "Yes." "I'm going to stop doing tests like that soon." "Why?" "Because you're going to start running the room, and I'm going to stop being the one who knows the answer before you do." She looked at him. She did not know what to say to that. So she said nothing, and he let her say nothing, and they drove back to the house in a silence that had, in the past week, stopped being uncomfortable. Friday was Vivienne. Arya had been thinking about it for 3 days and had changed her mind about the location twice. Not her father's house. Not a restaurant. Vivienne was good in restaurants. She had spent a lifetime being good in restaurants. Not Lucien's house, which would have put her at a visible advantage, but would also have made the whole meeting into a performance piece. And Arya wanted this one small and quiet and surgical. She picked a tea shop. It was on a corner she had walked past 100 times, and she had never been inside. Because Vivian had once told her in passing that tea shops are for women without anywhere else to be, which meant Vivian, by her own definition, was very rarely in them, which meant Vivian, walking into this one, would be on terrain she did not own. Arya got there early. She took the table in the far corner, back to the wall, view of the door, the same positioning she had chosen in the law office. She noticed, starting to pick her chairs the way Lucien picked his. Katya had offered, the night before, to come with her. Not into the meeting, just to the shop, to sit 2 tables over. Arya had thought about it for a long time and had said no. She has to see me alone, Arya had said. She will be unkind, Katya had said. I know. She will try to find the place in you that still wants her approval. I know. Do you still have that place in you, Miss Vance? Arya had taken a long breath. Yes, she had said. A little. Not as much as I did a month ago. Then she will find it. Let her. Katya had looked at her for a long moment, and then had nodded and had said, I will be at the house when you return. There will be soup. That had been the end of the conversation. Vivian walked into the tea shop at 2 minutes past the hour. She was perfectly dressed, because she was always perfectly dressed. A camel coat. A cream scarf. Pearls, small ones, the kind that did not shout. Her hair was done in the soft waves that Arya had watched her set in curlers 1,000 nights growing up. She looked, walking in, the way she always looked, like a woman whose schedule allowed her exactly 26 minutes for this appointment. She stopped 2 feet inside the door and scanned the room. She saw Arya. Arya watched very carefully what Vivian's face did in that first second. There was a flicker there, very small, almost nothing, almost easy to miss, that was not the flicker of a stepmother seeing a stepdaughter. It was the flicker of a woman seeing a problem. Vivian walked over, sat down across from her, did not say hello. You look tired, Vivian said. I've been busy. Clearly. A waitress appeared. Vivian ordered Earl Grey with milk, no sugar, in a tone that made the waitress nod and move on without writing anything down. Arya had already ordered hers. She had chosen the most boring tea on the menu, on purpose. She was not here to sip anything interesting. Why did you pick this place? Vivian said. Because you hate tea shops. I don't hate tea shops. You told me once that they were for women without anywhere else to be. I don't remember saying that. You said it at the club. I was 16. You were wearing green. Vivian's mouth tightened. She did remember. Arya saw her remember. All right, Vivian said, folding her hands on the table. You picked the venue. You picked the time. You clearly have something to say. Say it. I want to know what you told my mother. Vivian went very still. It lasted less than a second. It was enough. Your mother, Vivian said, was a very ill woman at the end. I'm not asking about the end. I'm asking about the conversation, the one before the end. You went to the hospital. You went alone. My father didn't know you were going. You went to her room and you said something to her, and 3 weeks later she died asking him a question about it. What did you say? I don't think this is a conversation we should have. We're having it. Arya. Vivian. You don't know what you're asking about. Then tell me. Vivian looked at her, really looked. And Arya saw, for the first time in her life, something go behind Vivian's eyes that was neither contempt nor performance. It was calculation, raw, quick, adult calculation. Vivian was doing math on her, right there at the table, and Arya understood that she was being reassessed in real time, and that the woman across from her was realizing, slowly, that the stepdaughter she had been filing under manageable for 11 years had somehow become a file she did not have. Your mother, Vivian said carefully, was not the only woman your father had. I know that. Do you? Yes. He married you while he was already sleeping with her. I've known that since I was 14. That's not what I mean. Arya's mouth went dry. Then what do you mean, Vivian? Vivian watched her for a long moment. I mean, she said, that there was another woman before your mother, during my marriage, during Celeste's childhood. I dealt with her the way women in my position deal with these things, quietly, financially, without fuss. Okay? That woman had a child. Okay. That child, Vivian said, was not carried to term. Arya did not move. "You're telling me—" "I am telling you," Vivian said, "that I paid for it to not be carried to term." The woman agreed. "There was a medical procedure, in a clinic in a state neither she nor your father had ever been to. She received a considerable amount of money. She signed documents. It was done." "And my mother?" "Your mother," Vivian said, "was told about it, yes." "By you? By me? When?" "About a month before she died." "Why?" Vivian tilted her head. The tilt was small. Arya had seen it 1,000 times. It was the tilt Vivian used before she said something she had been saving. "Because your mother," Vivian said, "had started to tell Gregory she wanted you acknowledged, officially, in the will, as a Vance. She had been pushing him on it for about 6 months, and he had been weakening, because he was a sentimental man and your mother was dying, and sentimental men lose their spine when women are dying. I went to see her because I needed her to understand what I was willing to do to protect my daughter's share of this family. I told her the story about the other woman. I told her about the procedure. I told her I would do it again, with different tools, if she kept pushing." Thoughts. Arya's hand was on her cup. She did not remember putting it there. "You threatened her," she said. "I warned her. You told a dying woman that you had paid for a woman to lose a pregnancy, and you told her to stop pushing for her daughter to be acknowledged, or you would—" "I told her I would not lose what I had built." "That's what you think you told her. That's not what she heard." "I don't control what she heard." "She heard you threaten me." Vivian's mouth moved. She did not answer. "You walked into my mother's hospital room," Arya said, and she was aware distantly that her voice had gone very quiet, and that quiet was not weakness in this moment. Quiet was a thing that was happening because her body had decided it did not need to be loud. And you told her a story about a baby that you had paid to make go away, and you did it so she would understand what you were willing to do to her child. To me. "I did not threaten you, Vivian. I did not threaten—" "Look at me." Vivian looked. "I am her child," Arya said. "I was her child, sitting next to her hospital bed, when she stopped eating, when she could not remember her own sister's name, when she asked me in the middle of one night, 'Is the baby all right?' And I thought she meant me, and I said, 'Yes, Mom, I'm here.' And she said, 'Not you, the other one.' And I thought she was dying delirious. I thought it was the morphine. You let me think it was the morphine for 4 years. I did not let you—" "You sent her to her grave," Arya said, thinking I was next. Vivian said nothing. The tea arrived. The waitress set the cup down in front of Vivian. She did not glance up. The waitress, sensing what she was standing in, left quickly. Vivian picked up the cup. Her hand was steady, because Vivian's hand had always been steady. And that was the thing Arya had spent a lifetime both hating and trying to learn. "You are not a child anymore," Vivian said. "No, so I will tell you the truth the way adults tell each other the truth. I did what I did because I had a daughter to protect, and a husband who did not have the stomach to make these decisions himself, and a family that would have collapsed if I had waited for him to do what needed to be done. Your mother made her choice. She chose to keep you. I respected that, more than you will ever know. I did not ask for the procedure with her. I asked for silence. She did not give it. So I went to see her, and I told her a story that she would understand, and I asked her to give it to me, and she did. She stopped pushing. Your father did not put you in the will. She died. That is what happened. You can hate me for it. You are entitled. But do not pretend you do not understand it, Arya. You are not stupid. You have had a week of being in that man's house, and you have already started to understand what protecting a thing looks like. You just wear a prettier coat when you do it. Arya stared at her. You think we're the same, she said. I think we will be, eventually. We are not. We are going to be. No. Arya. No, Vivian. She was shaking. Not outside. Inside. Somewhere very deep. She stood up. I have one more thing to ask you, she said. Ask. The other woman. Before my mother. Do you still have her name? Vivian considered her for a long moment. Yes, she said. You're going to give it to me. Why would I? Because, Arya said, I'm going to find out one way or another, and I am going to find out with you or without you. And if I find out without you, I'm going to assume the worst things about what you did to her, and I am going to say those worst things publicly, and they are going to become the version of the story everyone knows. You can give me the name. I will not promise to be kind with it. I will promise to be accurate." Vivian almost smiled. It was not a smile. It was the memory of a smile. It was the expression of a woman who had, apparently, just watched a much younger woman learn something in front of her. Her name, Vivian said, was Inez Marin. Arya stored it. She did not write it down. She did not say it out loud. "Is she alive?" she said. "I don't know." "You don't know." "I have not followed her life, Arya. I paid her to leave. She left. That was the deal." "Thank you, Vivian." "For what?" "For finally telling me a true thing." Arya walked out of the tea shop. She did not look back. She did not rush. She walked the way she had learned to walk in the last week, which was the walk of a person who did not have to hurry because the world had begun to move at her speed. Outside, the sidewalk was cold. The light was that hard winter light that made the buildings look flat. A man bumped into her shoulder and apologized automatically, and she did not flinch at being touched by a stranger, which she noticed and which felt new. The black car was at the corner. She got in. Volkov did not speak. He did not have to. He knew somehow that silence was the thing she needed right now, and he drove her out of the financial district and along the river road and then north, the long way home, because Lucien had told him, at some point, not to take the short way back when she was in the car after difficult meetings. She realized that, somewhere along the river. She realized a lot of things along the river. She realized Lucien had, without telling her, been building her a whole scaffolding of small kindnesses that she had not been noticing. The long way home. The secondary phone. The key Katya had handed her the first night. The not touching. The ceramic mug in the dusty office. The dark green dress on Wednesday morning, which he had picked because it was a dress that let her look powerful, without making her look costumed. The way he asked every morning whether she had slept, and waited for the answer before he said anything else. None of them were love, she knew that. Love was not scaffolding. Love was what you might build on top of a scaffolding, later, if the scaffolding held. But the scaffolding was, she realized, the first thing anyone had ever built for her. She was crying a little by the time they reached the gate. Not hard, not ugly, just a steady run of water down her face that she did not bother to wipe. Volkov looked at her once in the mirror and said, very carefully, "Shall I drive around another time, Miss Vance?" "No," she said. "Thank you. Take me in." She walked into the house. Katya was in the front hall, because Katya was always in the front hall when she came home from something hard, and Katya did not ask. She held out her arms just slightly, a small offering, not an insistence, and Arya, after a long second, walked into them. Katya held her for a minute. Not longer. A minute was what Arya could handle. "Soup is on the stove," Katya said. "Is he here?" "In the library." "Does he know?" "He has been listening at doors his whole life, Miss Vance. He knows approximately. He does not know details." "Okay." She went to the library. He was at the window, not at the desk. Hands in his pockets, watching the drive she had just come up because he had, she realized, been waiting for the car. He turned when she came in. He did not ask. "Inez Marin," she said. "Spell it." She spelled it. He pulled out his phone, sent a message, put the phone away. "Tomorrow," he said, "Volkov and 2 others will have a location on her. Alive or not. Where, when, with whom. You will get that information first before I do, and you will decide what to do with it. Okay?" "Arya." "Yes." "How are you?" She looked at him. She opened her mouth to give the answer she had been giving people for years. "I'm fine." And then she stopped, because she was starting to understand that he was not a man to whom you gave that answer. Not because he would punish you for it, but because he would believe you, and she did not want to be believed when she said it. "I'm not fine," she said. "No." She told me she had paid for another woman's pregnancy to end, before my mother. She told me she used that story to threaten my mother. She told me my mother heard it as a threat against me, specifically, and stopped pushing my father to put me in the will, and that's why I grew up the way I grew up. She told me I would understand eventually, that I would become her eventually, that she and I are the same. You're not. I know we're not. Are you sure? She looked at him sharply. Why would you ask me that? Because, he said, you're standing in a house belonging to a man who is, on paper, not very different from the people who did this to you. You are learning to read rooms. You are learning to pick rooms. You are learning to walk into buildings and not leave them until the person you came to see has cried. I am not pretending you are not learning. I am asking you, because nobody else is going to ask you, whether you are sure of the direction. She sat down. On the floor. She sat on the floor of his library in a camel coat because her legs had, once again, decided to stop holding her up, and she pressed the palms of her hands hard against her eyes, and she breathed. I don't know, she said. I don't know. I don't know, Lucien. Okay. I don't know if I'm becoming somebody I want to be or somebody I was always going to be. I don't know if there's a difference. I walked out of that room, and I was proud of myself for how I handled her. And then I got in the car and I thought she would have been proud of me for how I handled her. And I thought, the person I want to be proud of me is a woman. I just heard tell me she threatened my dying mother, and I don't know how to hold those two things. He did not come sit next to her. She noticed through the haze that he did not come sit next to her, and she understood why. Because if he had, he would have been comfort, and comfort right now would have closed the question she was asking. He stayed where he was. He let her sit on the floor and ask it. I don't think you're becoming her, he said eventually. I think you're becoming a person who can do what she does when she has to, which is not the same thing. Vivian does what she does because she has been afraid of losing her position since she was a young woman. You are not afraid of losing a position. You did not have a position to lose. What you are afraid of is not being seen, and you're building a life where you cannot be unseen again. Those are different engines, Arya. They move similar-looking cars, but the engines are different. She laughed. She did not mean to. That's a better answer, she said, than I was expecting. I've been thinking about it. Since when? Since the meeting with your father. Since you said good when I told you it was going to get ugly. I have been thinking, every day since then, about whether I was doing something to you or watching you do something to yourself. I decided about 2 nights ago that it was the second thing. How sure are you? Not completely. Good. Good? If you told me you were completely sure, I would know you were lying, and I would have to get up and leave this house. Noted. She sat on the floor for another minute. Then she got up. Not gracefully. She used the arm of one of the chairs, and she stood up, and she wiped her face with the back of her wrist, and she walked to the window and stood next to him, not touching, looking out at the same drive she had come up. Lucien. Yes. I'm going to marry you. He did not move. For a very long second, he did not move at all. Then, very slowly, he turned his head and looked at her sideways, and she saw, under the usual still surface of his face, something she had not seen before. Something that was not surprise, not relief, but a kind of quiet, careful attention, as though he had been walking along a cliff edge for a long time, and had just felt the ground under his foot go firm. When? He said. Not now, not this month. But I'm going to. I want you to know because I want you to stop making decisions on the assumption that I might leave. You're going to make different decisions if you know I'm not. Arya. Yes. You don't have to say that to get different decisions out of me. I know. I was already making them. I know, Lucien, I'm saying it because it's true. Not because it's a move. He looked at her for a long, long time. Okay, he said, very quietly. Okay. I am, he said, and his voice was a little rougher than it had been a minute ago. Going to need a moment. Take it. He took it. He took it standing there at the window, one hand braced lightly against the sill, the other in his pocket, and she did not look at him while he took it, because she understood that he had not had many moments like this in his life, and that a man like him did not like to be watched inside one. She looked out at the drive. She watched the last of the light come down through the trees. She watched Volkov in the distance, cross the drive with a phone to his ear, and she thought about the woman named Ines Marin, who was somewhere in the world right now, who did not know she had just been named, and whose life was about to be changed, gently or not, by 2 people standing at a window in a house she had never heard of. Then Lucien spoke. There's something you should know, he said. Yes? About me. Okay? Before the end of the month. I'll tell you. I want you to know it before you actually go through with what you just said, not after. What is it? It's bad. Is it worse than what I already think? It's not worse, it's specific. Then tell me when you tell me. Okay. She turned her head. She looked at him. She could see the edge of the tattoo on his forearm where his sleeve had been pushed up, and the dark line of his jaw, and the small gray in the temple of his hair she had not noticed before. And she thought clearly, without sentiment, you are a man who has done things, and you are a man who is letting me decide whether I want to know them. And this is the difference between you and Vivian, and this is why I am not her. Lucien. Yes. Find Inez Marin fast. I want to talk to her before Vivian does. You think Vivian will try? I think Vivian gave me that name because she is trying to get ahead of me giving it to someone else. I think she is going to call Inez tonight. I think we have a window of maybe 12 hours before that woman stops being reachable. He looked at her. That, he said, is a very good read. Yes. I'll send Volkov in the morning. Send him tonight. Arya, it's tonight, Lucien. He picked up the phone. He sent Volkov that night. The car left at 8:30. Arya stood on the steps and watched the red taillights disappear through the gate, and Katya came out and put a shawl around her shoulders without a word. And in the window on the second floor above the front door, Lucien watched them both from inside. Somewhere, in a city they did not yet know the name of, a woman named Inez Marin was about to get a knock on her door from a very large man in a dark coat who would be, by any measure, the gentlest visitor she had received in 11 years, and who would tell her, carefully, that a young woman whose name she had never heard wanted very much to talk to her, and was willing to come to her, and would not arrive with lawyers. Arya did not sleep that night. She sat up in the library with Lucien until almost 3, not working, not talking about anything in particular, just sharing the long, slow end of the day, and at one point she realized she had her hand on his forearm, over the tattoo, the script she still could not read, and that she did not remember putting it there, and that he had not moved his arm away. Neither of them mentioned it. Neither of them had to. Outside, the long black trees of the drive stood perfectly still, and the house breathed around them, and somewhere in another wing Katya was drinking a small glass of something neat and thinking about the woman who was about to walk into this family's oldest secret with her eyes open, and on the 7th floor of a tea shop building downtown, a woman in pearls was reading a message on her phone that she had not expected to receive, and her hand, for the first time in a long time, was not steady. Volkov called at 4 in the morning. Arya had finally fallen asleep on the couch in the library, one hand still loosely over Lucien's forearm, her head against the armrest at an angle that was going to hurt for 2 days. Lucien had not moved. He had, at some point, draped his jacket over her shoulders. When the phone buzzed against the side table, he picked it up before the second ring and walked quietly to the window so the sound would not wake her. Yes. Volkov spoke in Russian for about 40 seconds, low and clipped. Lucien answered once, then, put her on. A pause. Then a woman's voice, very tired, very careful, across the line. Lucien listened for a long time without speaking. He said, eventually, "Thank you, Miss Marin. I understand. We'll wait to hear from you." He ended the call. Arya was sitting up. "She's alive," he said. "Where?" "2 states over, small town. She has been a nurse for 9 years, under the same name. She has 2 children, 7 and 9, not your father's, with a man named Reyes." Arya's chest did something complicated. Reyes. Not that Reyes, different family entirely. It's a common name. I checked. Are you sure? Volkov pulled the marriage and the birth certificates while he was sitting on her kitchen floor. Different city. Different last 4 years entirely. I am sure, Arya. Okay. She wants a day to decide whether to meet you. Okay. She wants you to know before she decides that she is not angry. She said that twice. She asked Volkov to make sure I told you. Arya closed her eyes. Okay, she said again. It was the only word her mouth seemed to have left. Lucien sat down on the edge of the couch. Not close. He let the couch do the work of being close. Arya leaned her head against his shoulder, carefully, and he let her, and they sat like that for a long time, without saying anything, and outside the window the sky began the slow change from black to the soft blue-gray that came before sunrise. Ines Marine agreed to meet on a Thursday. Arya flew out on a Wednesday afternoon with Lucien and Volkov, and then with neither of them. That had been her condition. Lucien had pushed back once, not about safety, about logistics, and then, when she had said no, "Lucien, I am doing this part alone," he had stopped pushing and simply made sure that the hotel was 3 blocks from Ines's house, that Volkov would be in a car 2 streets over but not visible, and that her phone had a button she could press that would bring both of them to the door in under 4 minutes. The meeting was in Ines's kitchen, not her living room. That was Ines's choice. Kitchens, Ines had said, were easier to sit in when you did not know someone. Ines was a small woman, smaller than Arya had expected. Dark hair going silver at the temples, a face that had been beautiful and was now something harder to name, something that had weathered into itself. She was in scrubs because she had come off a shift an hour before and had not yet changed. Her hands were rough from hand sanitizer. There were children's drawings on the refrigerator, held up by alphabet magnets. The house smelled faintly of garlic and laundry detergent. She poured them both coffee. She put the milk carton on the table between them so Arya could reach it herself. "I didn't know she sent me that money because of your mother," Ines said, after a while. "I knew there was a wife. I knew she was the one making the offer. I did not know there was another woman in the story, and I did not know there was a child. Not you. Not yet." "When did you find out about me?" "About a year after. A newspaper photograph, a social column. Gregory Vance with a little girl at some charity thing. The caption said daughter. I looked at the girl and I did math, and I understood, and I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time. I'm sorry." Don't do that. It is not your apology to make." Arya set her cup down. "Vivian told me," she said, "that you agreed to the procedure." "I did." "She said you signed papers." "I signed papers." "Did she threaten you?" Ines looked at her for a long moment. "She did not raise her voice," Ines said. "She did not do anything a lawyer could point at. She came to the small apartment I had at the time, and she sat in my only chair, and she explained to me, very kindly, that if I did not take the money and do what she was asking, she would do 3 things. She would make sure the hospital I worked at did not renew my visa sponsorship. She would make sure my brother, who had a small immigration case pending, lost it. And she would make sure that the child, if I kept it, would grow up with the same last name I had, which she said with a small smile, because she and I both understood that my last name was not going to help a child the way a different last name might. She said all of this while drinking the coffee I had made her, and she left a check on the table when she was done. It was a very large check. "Ines." "Yes." "I'm going to do something to her." "I know. I saw the picture of you in the paper last week, the green dress. I showed it to my husband. He asked who you were. I said, I think she's the girl who's going to do something to the woman who sat in my kitchen 11 years ago. He said, good. He does not know the details. He does not need to. Would you testify?" "To what?" "To anything. A deposition, a statement, a recording. I don't know yet what shape it will take. I'm asking if you would be willing, if it came to it." Ines took a long breath. "I have 2 children," she said. "I know." "They do not know about the first one." "I know." "I cannot be on the front of a newspaper, Arya. I am a nurse in a small town, and my life is quiet. And if that life becomes loud, my children will pay for it, and I will not do that to them." "I understand." "But," Arya looked up. "But," Ines said, "if you can find a way to use what I know without my name on it, I will give you everything. I still have the check. I still have the card she gave me. I have the name of the clinic and the doctor, and I have the date, and I have a letter she sent me 6 months later telling me she expected to never hear from me again. I kept it all. I have kept it in a box under my bed for 11 years because I did not know what I was keeping it for, and now I do." Arya's eyes were wet. She did not wipe them. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. Use it well." "I will." "Use it," Ines said, "in a way that does not make you into her." Arya looked up sharply. "What?" "You heard me." "Yes, I heard you. I'm telling you because nobody else is going to, and because your mother—" Ines stopped, took a breath. "Because I read about your mother, and I think she would tell you if she were here. Women like Vivian Ashford did not get made by accident. Somebody, a long time ago, did something to her, and she decided she was never going to be the one it got done to again. That is how they are made, every single one of them. Do not become one of them, Arya. Be the woman who stops the thing, not the woman who wins the thing. There's a difference. It is a small difference. It will matter every day of your life. Arya did not answer for a long time. I'll try, she said eventually. Trying is the whole of it. They talked for another hour. About small things. About Inez's children. About her husband, who was a mechanic, who did not know about any of this and did not need to. About the garden in the back, which was mostly tomatoes, which she grew badly but with great pride. When Arya stood up to go, Inez hugged her. It was a short hug. Neither of them cried. There was nothing pretty about it, and it was the most honest physical contact Arya had had with another woman since her mother had died. At the door, Inez held her at arm's length. One more thing, she said. Yes, your mother did not sign those papers for the money. I read about the settlement. I read about the waiver. Your father's family would have said she took his name's protection off for money. She did not. She signed so she could keep you. That was the only thing on the table. They offered her a lot of money to leave, and she said no, and then they took the money off the table and put the paper in front of her and said, sign this or we will take the child. And she signed. Your father may not have known it was put that way. Vivian did. Arya's hand gripped the doorframe. How do you know that? Because the lawyer they used with her was the same lawyer they used with me. And he told me years later, drunk at a conference in a different city, because guilt is a long illness. I do not have his statement. He is dead now. But I know it, and I believe it, and I have spent a lot of years believing it. Your mother did not sell you, Arya. She bought you, with everything she had. Arya cried on the steps. Inez led her, held her briefly again, pushed her, gently, toward the street. Go, Inez said. Go be her daughter. Arya went. The flight back was quiet. Lucien did not ask. Volkov did not ask. Arya stared at the window and watched the country turn dark below them, and thought, at one point, about what Inez had said. The part about the woman who stops the thing versus the woman who wins the thing, and she turned it over in her hand for the whole flight. She decided, somewhere over a state she had never been to, that she wanted to try to be both. She did not know, yet, if that was possible. They landed at night. Katya had soup. Arya ate 2 bowls. She slept for 10 hours, and when she woke up, she knew what she was going to do. She did not take it to court. That was the first thing she decided, and the thing that surprised Lucien the most, and the thing that, in the weeks after, made a few of his lawyers quietly furious. She did not take her father to court over the trust. She did not take Vivian to court over Inez. She did not take Reyes to court over any of it. She went to the board instead. Vance Holdings had a board of directors. 9 people. 4 of them were Gregory's close allies. 5 of them were not. Arya had spent 2 full weeks with Lucien's lawyer, a woman named Helen Park, going through every board member's history, every filing, every public vote, every quiet grudge. By the time Arya walked into the boardroom on a Tuesday morning, she had the 5. She wore the dark green dress again. She brought Helen Park. She brought the trust documents. She brought a summary, in very plain language, of the 9 years of withdrawals her father had made from her mother's trust. She brought a sealed envelope containing a notarized statement from Inez Marin that did not have Inez's name on it, but had every relevant document from the box under her bed, including the check, the card, and the letter. She brought the medical records her father had sent to the law office, the real number it would have cost to save her mother, and a summary of what Gregory had paid out of the trust that same year on a yacht. She spoke for 23 minutes. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She ended by laying a single piece of paper in the middle of the long boardroom table. This, she said, is my proposal. I am not asking the board to remove my father as chairman. I am not asking you to claw back what he has taken. I am asking for 3 things. 1, the trust, as of today, is separated from any administration by anyone with the last name Vance. It goes to an independent trustee. 2, a public apology, written by him, in language I will review, acknowledging that my mother, Eleanor Cassidy, was never offered the recognition or the support she was owed, and that this was a failure of his, not hers. 3. Vivian Ashford will step off the advisory committee she sits on in this company, quietly, effective within the month. No announcement is necessary. The room was silent. The oldest board member, a man named Whitford, who had known Arya's mother once, a long time ago, cleared his throat. "And if we decline?" "Then everything I have in this folder," Arya said, "goes to 3 reporters who have already asked me in the last week for comment. I will not send it angrily. I will not send it with commentary. I will let the documents speak. You know what they say. You have been looking at them for 20 minutes. Miss Vance, I'm not asking for his chair, Mr. Whitford. I'm asking for my mother's name and for my stepmother's quiet exit and for the money that belongs to me to be in hands that are not his. That is all. If the board agrees, none of this leaves this room. That is also part of the proposal." Whitford looked at the other members. The 5 she had chosen looked back at him. It took him, Arya noticed, about 4 seconds to count the room. "The board," he said, "will take this under advisement until tomorrow morning." "That's fine," Arya said. She stood up. She thanked them for their time, which she had rehearsed in the mirror and which came out evenly. She walked out. In the hall, Helen Park looked at her. "They're going to say yes," Helen said. "I know. You don't want the chair." "I don't want the chair. The chair would be a trap. I'd have to sit in it for 20 years pretending to be my father, and my father never did a day's real work in his own company. I'd rather build something of my own." "Smart. I had good teachers in the last month." They went outside. The car was waiting. Arya got in, and she sat very still all the way home, because she had been bracing her body for 6 hours, and her body was now beginning, very slowly, to release. The board said yes. It took them 10 hours, not 1. Whitford called her at 6 the next morning. He was apologetic, carefully, about certain procedural details. Arya accepted the details without a word. The trust was transferred within the week. Gregory wrote the apology. He revised it twice under her pen, and the final version said her mother's name 4 times in 4 sentences, and was, for a man like Gregory Vance, as close to a real apology as he was capable of producing. Vivian stepped off the committee. There was no announcement. She did it on a Tuesday morning, by email, citing personal reasons. 3 days after Vivian's resignation, she sent Arya a message. Was this necessary? Arya read it. She thought about it for an hour. She wrote very carefully, "Yes, I am sorry that it was. I am not sorry that I did it." She pressed send. Vivian did not reply. They did not speak again for a long time. The thing with Anton Reyes turned out to be easier than any of them had expected, because Anton Reyes, as Lucien had said on the first night, liked his knees. The statement about Arya had done its work. The photograph had done more. The trust transfer, which was private but not invisible to the right eyes, did the rest. Reyes sent a man with a soft voice and a good suit to Lucien's house one afternoon, and the man and Lucien sat in the library for 45 minutes, and when the man left, he shook Lucien's hand, and Gregory's debt was quietly restructured to Reyes's organization without Arya's name appearing in a single document. Reyes, Lucien said later, had agreed to walk away from the marriage arrangement the moment he had understood that Arya was not for sale, and had agreed to a longer repayment schedule because the alternative for him was a fight with a man he did not want to fight. "He's not a good man," Lucien said. "Don't let the ease fool you. He's a practical man." "That's different." "Yes." "Is that what you are?" "I'm a practical man," Lucien said, "most days. On the best days, I am something slightly better than that." "What's the best version of you, Lucien?" He looked at her for a long moment. "You'll see it, I hope." "When?" "Whenever you're still around to see it." "I told you. I'm going to marry you." "You did tell me." "I haven't changed my mind. I noticed." He told her the thing he had said he was going to tell her 2 nights before the end of that month, in the library, at a very small hour. It was not what she had expected. She had expected a murder. She had expected a secret wife. She had expected a war crime in some country she could not locate on a map. What he told her instead was the long, plain story of a man he had worked for 12 years earlier, when he had been younger and more desperate, and had not yet learned which kinds of money were worth touching. He had done one job for that man, a specific job. He had not known, when he took it, exactly what the job was for, but he had known enough. He had taken the money anyway. The job had contributed eventually to the ruin of a small family in a city they did not live in anymore. Not their deaths, their ruin. A father who had lost his business, a mother who had lost her health, a boy who was now 17 years old and who Lucien had been quietly putting money into the education of through a foundation in a third party's name for 9 years. He told her this without ornament, no excuses, no flattening. He ended by saying, "The family does not know. They will never know. I do not want credit. I am telling you because if we are going to do what you said, you need to know that there is a boy somewhere in this country who has a college fund because of me, and he has it because I took a job I should not have taken, and I will be paying on that for the rest of my life. And if you ever want to walk away because of it, I will not try to stop you." Arya sat with it for a long time. "Is the payment ever going to feel finished to you?" she asked. "No." "Good. Good. If it ever felt finished, Lucien, then I would know you had let yourself off. I would rather be with a man who is never going to feel finished than a man who decided at some point that he had paid enough." He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, she saw something move in them that she did not have a word for. "Okay," he said. "Okay." They were married quietly 6 months later, in the garden of that house, with Katya and Volkov and Helen Park, and 2 of Lucien's oldest people, and one of Arya's, Mia, the barista from the coffee shop on 5th, who Arya had tracked down, and, with Lucien's quiet help, slowly become friends with over the course of the spring. Mia cried during the vows, even though she barely knew the bride and did not know the groom at all, because she was, Arya had discovered, one of those people who cried at weddings the way some people sneezed at flowers. Arya's mother's locket was pinned inside the bodice of her dress. Gregory was not there. She had thought about inviting him. She had gone back and forth on it for weeks. In the end, she had sent him a letter, not an invitation, that said, "I'm getting married on the 20th. You are not invited to the ceremony. I would be willing to see you, alone, the weekend after." He had replied, after 2 days, that he would come. He had come. They had sat in the same tea shop she had once chosen for Vivian. They had talked, awkwardly, for 90 minutes. He had cried once. She had not. At the end, he had asked if she would ever forgive him. She had said, "I don't know. I'm going to try. Not for you, for me. Because carrying this is heavy, and I have other things I want to carry. Ask me again in a year." He had nodded. He had not touched her. He had paid for both teas carefully, and he had left. She had not gone home and cried. She had gone home and taken a very long walk in the garden and watched the late light on the hedges, and by the time she had come back inside, she had felt, not forgiven him, no, not yet, but something steadier than forgiveness, which was that she had become, somewhere in the last year, a woman who did not need him to be different in order for her to be all right. She thought about that a lot later, how it was not the same thing as forgiveness, how it was, in some ways, better. Forgiveness required other people. The thing she had become required only herself. Ines Marin did not come to the wedding either, but she sent a card. It was a small card, handwritten, and it said only, "You did it without becoming her. Your mother would have loved you today. Inez." Arya kept the card in a box under her own bed, later the way Inez had kept hers. The years that came after were not clean and they were not simple. The company Arya built, a small investment firm, mostly quiet, mostly ethical in a word Arya had stopped being embarrassed by, grew slower than her accountants wanted and faster than her critics expected. She fought with Lucien, sometimes badly. She lost a deal early on that she should have won because she had been too careful. She won a deal later, larger than anyone had expected, because she had been careful in a different way. She learned when to be careful and when to be the other thing. She made enemies. She kept some of them because enemies were useful, and she let others go, because some enemies were only expensive and not worth keeping. She found, over time, that she had a particular talent for one specific thing, and it was not the thing she had expected. It was not reading rooms. She did that, yes, but she had learned that. It was not picking rooms. She did that too. The thing that turned out to be hers, genuinely hers, the thing no one had taught her, was that she was very, very good at finding young women who had been underestimated by their families and funding them before they knew they were worth being funded. 5 such women in the first 2 years, 11 by the 5th. By the 10th year, nearly 40. She did not do it loudly. She did not put her name on the fund. She ran it quietly, through Helen Park's office, and the women who benefited from it did not always know where the money had come from, and that was fine with her. That was in fact the point, because what her mother had given her, Arya had come to understand, was not money. Her mother had given her the specific, stubborn, unshowy stubbornness to keep a child that the world had told her to unkeep. And the only way Arya could think to pay that forward was quietly and often and for a long time. She did not, in the end, become Vivienne. She had spent enough time afraid of becoming Vivienne to make the not becoming a practice. Practices she had learned somewhere along the way were more reliable than promises. She made the practice every day. Some days she failed at it. On those days, she told Lucien, and Lucien, who had his own practice, nodded. And in the morning, they both tried again. Vivienne Ashford lived another 11 years. She and Arya saw each other 3 times in that period, twice at funerals, neither of them family. Once, the 3rd time, at a gallery opening Arya had not known Vivienne would be at. They had nodded. They had not spoken. At the end of the night, as Arya was leaving, Vivienne had stopped her near the coat check and had said, very quietly, "The girl in the green dress, in the paper, all those years ago. That was not you anymore by then. Was it?" Arya had considered the question. "No," she had said. "That was the first version. There have been others. And this one. This one is the one I'm keeping for a while." Vivienne had nodded. She had said, "Good," in a tone that was not kind but was also not cruel, and then she had put on her coat and she had left. Arya had watched her go. She had not felt triumph. She had not felt grief. She had felt the strange, flat peace of having outgrown a weather system she had once thought was the whole sky. Celeste, oddly, was the one Arya became something like close to, in the end. Not friends. Celeste was never going to be her friend, but Celeste had, in her late 20s, left the Vance house and moved across the country and started a life of her own. And she had written Arya a long letter the year after, apologizing for a lot of small things Arya had almost forgotten and a few large things Arya had not. And Arya had written back, carefully, and they had kept writing for almost a decade. Celeste married badly, divorced, married better, had 1 child. She named the child Eleanor. She asked Arya in a letter if that was all right. Arya had cried for an hour and written back yes, and she had been the little girl's godmother, in a small way, for the rest of her life. Gregory Vance died in the 12th year after the gala. It was not sudden. He had been sick for a while. Arya had visited him in the last 6 months, more often than she had expected she would. They did not become close. They became, at the end, something like civil. On the last visit, the day before he died, he had held her hand for a long time without speaking. At one point he had said, "Your mother," and had not finished the sentence, and had looked at her with something in his face that she chose, after a moment of consideration, to interpret as the apology he had never quite managed to write. She had said, "I know, Dad." He had closed his eyes. She had stayed until the night nurse came. At the funeral, she gave a short speech. It was not a flattering speech. It was also not a cruel one. She said that her father had been a complicated man who had done some serious harm and some quiet good, and that she had spent a great deal of her life being angry at him, and that in the last months she had been trying, imperfectly, to put the anger down. She said that putting it down was not the same thing as saying he had not deserved it. She said that she was putting it down because carrying it had begun to cost her more than keeping it was worth, and that she thought her mother, who had been a practical woman, would have approved. She did not cry during the speech. She cried afterwards, alone, in the car, with Lucien sitting beside her, not speaking. They had 2 children, eventually. A daughter first, who they named Eleanor as well, because there were no rules about such things, and Arya had not been able to stop herself. A son, 2 years later, whom Lucien named for his own mother's father, a man he had never met, and whose name he had learned only in his late 20s from a letter he had found by accident. Both children grew up in the stone house that had, by then, stopped being Lucien's house and become their house, and their childhood was, by Arya's own assessment, not perfect. No childhood was, but it was a childhood in which neither of them had ever had to wonder whether they were loved, and that, Arya had decided very early, was the minimum she owed them. On her 45th birthday, Arya sat on the steps of the stone house with Lucien. There was a small party going on inside, mostly their own people. Katya was still there, older now, slower, still refusing to be called anything but Katya. Volkov had retired 3 years earlier, but had, predictably, not stopped coming to the house on Sundays. Mia ran a bakery in the city now, her own, paid for by a loan Arya had helped her get from a bank that had at first declined her. Helen Park had made it spectacularly, and was inside arguing with one of Lucien's nephews about a wine. Lucien handed Arya a glass of water. He had learned over the years that she liked water better than champagne on her birthday. 30 minutes alone, he said. Then we go back in. Deal. They did not talk for a while. The garden was full of the last of the summer light. A moth was working the lamp by the door unsuccessfully. Somewhere in the house, Eleanor was laughing about something, probably something Volkov had said, because Volkov made Eleanor laugh more than anyone else alive. Arya thought, as she sometimes did on quiet nights, about the girl in the navy dress. The girl who had stood at the edge of the Hartley ballroom 22 years ago and had counted the chandeliers because counting them was better than looking at anyone. The girl whose hands had shaken. The girl who had been about to be spent. She thought about that girl, and she thought, as she had thought 1,000 times, I would go back for her if I could. And then, as she always did, she reminded herself that she did not have to. That girl had gone herself. That girl had taken a stranger's hand, which was a stupid thing to do and the right thing to do, and the difference between those two things had been something only she had been able to measure at the time. That girl had been the one who had saved her, not Lucien, not even her mother. That girl. She thought, sometimes, that if she had a single piece of advice for a young woman at the edge of a ballroom, it would be this: you are not going to be rescued. Not really. Sometimes a hand will be held out to you, and sometimes you should take it, and sometimes that will turn out well, but the taking of it is the thing that matters. The person who takes it is the person you are going to have to be for the rest of your life. Nobody else is going to do that for you. A kind man, or an unkind one, can change the room you are standing in, but they cannot change whether you are the kind of woman who walks through it or the kind who stays at the edge. That is yours. It was always yours. It is always going to be yours. She had said this once, in a speech to a small room of women she was funding, and one of them, a very young one, from a small town, with a shake in her voice, had asked her afterwards, "Are you saying we have to do it alone?" Arya had thought about it. "No," she had said. "I am saying that we do not get to do it alone, but we also do not get to skip the part where we do it. Both of those things are true at the same time. I had help. You will have help. You also have to decide in one specific moment of your life that you are not going to be the version of you that the room has already agreed on. That moment is going to be quick. It is not going to feel big at the time. It is going to feel like a second where you could do either thing and you do the harder one. That second is the whole of it. You will have other seconds later, but that first one is the door. Everything else is the house." She had not known, when she had said it, that she was quoting her own life back to herself. She had realized it only later, lying in bed, listening to Lucien breathe next to her, and the wind in the trees and one of the children turning over in a room down the hall. She had realized then that she had built exactly the life the girl in the navy dress had not known she was allowed to want, and that the strangest part of it all was that the life had not made her safe. It had made her something better than safe. It had made her someone who did not need to be. On the steps, on her 45th birthday, she leaned her head briefly against Lucien's shoulder. "Are you happy?" he asked her. Because he asked her every year, on this night, because he had learned a long time ago that she did not always know she was happy unless someone asked. "Yes," she said, "I think I am." "Good." "Lucien." "Yes." "Thank you." "For what?" "For the first night, for the key, for the long way home, for not letting me become her." "You didn't let yourself." "I know, but you made the not letting possible. That's different. That matters. He did not answer for a moment. Then he said very quietly, "You made the same possible for me, in case you didn't know." She had known, but it was nice to hear him say it. They sat for the rest of the 30 minutes. Then they got up, stiff, because they were both older than they had been, and they walked back into the house. Eleanor was at the piano now, picking at something she was not good at yet, and was going to get good at eventually. The boy was on the rug, building something out of blocks with Volkov, who was lying on his side next to him like a very large, very patient dog. Katya was in the kitchen, pretending she was not watching them all from the doorway. Helen had won her argument about the wine. Arya stood in the hallway for a second and looked at the room full of people, and felt, all at once and for the 100th time, the weight of how unlikely all of it was. How close she had come, on a Tuesday night in a navy dress, to being a footnote in someone else's deal. How narrow the door she had walked through had been. How narrow the door she had become now for other women to walk through. She put her hand on Lucien's back, just lightly. She walked into the room. She belonged exactly where she was standing, and that, in the end, was not a throne, and it was not a crown, and it was not a queen's title. It was a room full of people she had chosen and who had chosen her back, and a life she had built by deciding over and over again for 22 years to be the version of herself that the world had told her she was not allowed to be. It was in every way that mattered enough. It was in every way that mattered hers.